Chapter 2047. When Xiaohua heard this, his heart swayed and he hugged Xue Xue tightly. But then he smiled and said, "Wife, don't think too much. After all, you have not built your foundation. If you dual cultivate now, it will definitely affect your cultivation. Even if your husband is selfish, it is impossible for me to take your primordial yin. Besides, the Ling Lei pill is about to be refined. Why should you and I be anxious? Husband, this concubine is afraid." Xue Xue raised her neck and said, kissing Xiaohua's lips. Her strength was extremely strong, as if only by doing so could she abandon the fear in her heart. Xiaohua knew that Xue Xue was frightened and her state of mind was damaged. If he did not make up for it in time, it would definitely affect her cultivation. Thus, he hugged Xue Xue and said some lingering words in her ear, coaxing her to sleep. Then, Xiaohua sat cross-legged and entered his space. "Little Huang, you are awake?" In the space, little Huang stretched and lay on the ground with half-closed eyes. Mother," little Huang replied, "I should be awake, but I am still a little sleepy." Xiaohua looked at little Huang. There did not seem to be any special changes, only his figure was slightly bigger. If he did not pay attention, he might not be able to see it. "Good," Xiaohua replied and began to think about his own matters. Xiaohua originally wanted to wait for the Sword Heart Yuan Seed technique to succeed in dream execution before splitting his primordial spirit according to the secret technique and cultivate different techniques. But in front of the absolute strength of the three elders of Ardent Fire Mountain, he could not remain calm. He did not want to waste any time and urgently needed to protect himself and protect Xue Xue's strength. However, when he activated the secret technique and was about to use it, he hesitated again. Last time, when he split his primordial spirit, the pain of his primordial spirit had just subsided. Moreover, the Ling Lei pill was being refined. At this time, even if he succeeded in splitting his primordial spirit, it would definitely hinder the refinement of the pill. After pondering for a long time, Xiaohua understood. He smiled bitterly and thought to himself, "What is wrong with this young master? I'm not calm at all. Now, this young master has a secret technique that others do not know, but it must be done step by step and not be disturbed by external things. Senior Huang Yi has suffered so much, this young master still has not understood his own feelings? Stay calm, stay calm. Only by remaining unchanged can we be victorious in every battle." As he thought about this, Xiaohua's mind left the space and silently operated the Buddhist sect's mental cultivation method. Only then did his mental state slowly calm down. Goldie was flabbergasted as he watched Xiaohua come in and go out. Inexplicably, he stretched his body again, and his figure quietly grew a little bigger. In the blink of an eye, another 10 days passed. Xiaohua and Xue Xue only cultivated behind closed doors and didn't even take half a step out of the cave. During this period of time, neither the fire hibiscus nor the fire qilin appeared in front of the cave. On the other side of Xiaohua's Immortal's Cave, which was also a foundation-building cultivator's Immortal's Cave, Xuanyan School's Liang Yu was whispering to Yen Yu. He then said, "Senior Martial Brother Yen, I'm afraid we can't carry out the plan we discussed. Although that Xiaohua appeared in Haoming City, he saved Huofurong of the Ardent Fire Mountain and is now favored by the three elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain. If we attack him, I'm afraid we'll bring about endless harm. It's just the Ardent Fire Mountain. How can it be compared to my Xuanyan School?" Yen Yu's expression was very gloomy. Obviously, he didn't like hearing this news that made him angry. "Moreover, this matter, not only must we do it, we must do it quickly. Senior Martial Brother Yen, do you want to die?" Liang Yu advised in astonishment. "If Xiaohua were to die in our hands, wouldn't the three elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain fly into a rage? With the fiery tempers of Hua Baikong and Hua Yaishui, wouldn't they pinch us to death? They simply wouldn't care about our identities as disciples of the Xuanyan School. Moreover, do you think that the masters would be serious with the three elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain, who are comparable to 6 nascent soul cultivators, for the sake of you and me?" Yen Yu narrowed his eyes and stared at the darkness inside the Immortal's Cave for a long time. He then said in a low voice, "Although Xiaohua saved Huofurong, he wasn't a disciple of the Ardent Fire Mountain after all. Why would the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain protect him? We secretly killed him. Even the Imperial Thunder sect doesn't know who did it, so how would the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain know? This Dawn Rain continent is so big. Even a spirit-severing cultivator might not be able to find the reason for the disappearance of a Foundation establishment cultivator, right? Little brother, from the looks of the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain, it seems that they don't just want to treat Xiao Hua as Hua Furong's savior. Liang Yu frowned and explained, listening to their tone, it seems that they want to treat Xiao Hua as Hua Furong's dual cultivation partner. They actually introduced him to Xian Yunzi and Taoist master Shui Mo. Moreover, Hua Furong even accompanied Xiao Hua to propose a toast to us. Oh really? Yen Yu was somewhat dazed. He said in a flustered and exasperated manner, if that's the case, then it's really troublesome. Could it be that this old man's grandson will die in vain? Therefore, Senior Marshal Brother Yen, you and I better not take the risk. Liang Yu advised, if your grandson is gone, then let the younger generation give birth to another one. Isn't everything settled? If I can give birth, then why would I waste so much effort to take revenge? When this was mentioned, Yen Yu was ashamed and angry again. My bloodline is in that little bastard's body. If he dies, where will my bloodline be passed on? Heh. Liang Yu knew Yen Yu's bitterness. He chuckled and no longer spoke. Sitting on a chair, Yen Yu drank mouthful after mouthful of spirit wine. However, he suddenly asked, that's not right, Junior Marshal Brother Liang. Didn't you say that Xiao Hua has an aura-refining Junior Marshal sister who is with him? Their attitude is very intimate. Moreover, this Yen has also seen that female cultivator who is as beautiful as a celestial being. She is 100 times better than the incomparably ugly Hua Furong. How could Xiao Hua abandon his partner and find someone else? Haha, speaking of this, Liang Yu still has to tell you. Liang Yu wasn't blind. Of course, he saw the Fire Qilin's infatuation with Shui. He whispered this matter to Yen Yu. Forget it. Yen Yu slapped the chair and said dejectedly, is there still a need to say it? How could Xiao Hua and Shui escape the clutches of the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain? I'm afraid that this matter has already been decided. The 2 beauties of the Imperial Thunder sect will be occupied by 2 ugly people. Therefore, even if Xiao Hua isn't willing, in order to make him willing, the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain will definitely start with Shui. Senior Marshal Brother Yen, you should let this matter go. Liang Yu said with a smile after seeing that he had persuaded Yen Yu. Even if I don't want to, I have to. Yen Yu said with a flick of his sleeve, I'm not stupid enough to go against a nascent soul cultivator. Saying this, Yen Yu got up from the chair and walked out. Where is Senior Marshal Brother Yen going? Liang Yu asked with a smile. I'm going out for a stroll. Yen Yu said, if I see any aura-refining brat I don't like, I'll kill him while I'm at it. I'll make other cultivators as depressed as I am. Chapter 2048. Liang Yu laughed, knowing that Yen Yu was truly depressed. However, in less than an hour, Yen Yu returned with a look of exultation. What? How many Qi refinement brats did you kill? Liang Yu put away a jade slip and asked with a smile. Hee, I got some news again. Yen Yu whispered a few words to Liang Yu. Liang Yu frowned and said with displeasure, Senior Marshal Brother Yen, this matter is clearly impossible. Why force yourself? Junior Marshal Brother Liang, don't you want the storage pouches of those gold core cultivators? Don't you want Xiao Hua's Samadhi True Fire cultivation method? Yen Yu laughed. Maybe Xiao Hua's Samadhi True Fire was obtained from the storage pouches of those gold core cultivators. He's just an early Foundation establishment brat, yet he can cultivate the Samadhi True Fire in just a few years. What if Junior Marshal Brother Liang obtains the Samadhi True Fire? Besides, in the storage pouches of those gold core cultivators, there's probably something even better than the Samadhi True Fire, right? Thinking about how Xiao Hua's early Foundation establishment cultivation was actually able to deal with 3 heavenly demon sect disciples of the same cultivation level, Yen Yu naturally knew that Xiao Hua obtained a lot from the storage pouches of those gold core cultivators. How could he not covet it? Seeing that Liang Yu was tempted, Yan Yu said again, according to my plan, we don't have to act against Xiaohua right now. Let's first see the attitude of the three elders of Ardent Fire Mountain and Xiaohua's movements. After all, that's a gold core cultivator's storage pouch. I'm also somewhat tempted. If it weren't for the fact that I don't have absolute confidence right now, I'd definitely act myself. Why would I need to inform Junior Martial Brother? Yan Yu pondered for a long time, then gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, Xiaohua's Samadhi True Fire is very powerful, and from what I heard, his flying technique is also very successful. I'm afraid the two of us won't be able to easily deal with him. We might even have to call Senior Martial Brothers Jie Ming and Qian Han over. And that's the only way. Yan Yu nodded and said, we also swore that if there's news of Xiaohua, we'll immediately send a message. Moreover, on the way back, I also thought a lot. Now that Xiaohua has the backing of Ardent Fire Mountain, besides the Imperial Thunder Sect, he has to do it cleanly. We can't leave any hidden dangers. For this, I have to prepare something. Liang Yu was taken aback. His eyeballs spun a few times as he asked curiously, what other tricks does Senior Martial Brother Yen have up his sleeve? Heh, this Yen will prepare for this matter alone. When I need Junior Brother Liang, I will naturally inform you. Yan Yu said with a smile, this is the only time. We absolutely cannot let Xiaohua escape. Junior Martial Brother Liang, please send the message talisman. I'll take a look at the shops in Haoming City. Alright. Liang Yu wasn't sure what Yan Yu wanted to do, so he could only nod and send out the transmission talisman. Inside Xiaohua's cave, the pill liquid of the Ling Lei pill had been refined. Under Xiaohua's alchemy technique, it had gradually fused. The two kinds of pill liquid, yin and yang, were fused smoothly under the condensation of the sky yin grass juice. Xiaohua sat upright in front of the cauldron, concentrating. Shui was also not in the alchemy room at this time. She was only sitting in the quiet room, meditating with her eyes closed, carefully comprehending the technique that Xiaohua gave her. This technique was very strange. It was completely different from what Shui practiced together, so it was quite strenuous. After a few more days, Xiaohua came out from the alchemy room, somewhat exhausted. Shui immediately opened her eyes and asked considerately, Husband, did the refining go smoothly? Who is your husband? He is a genius. Xiaohua boasted, it's all a piece of cake, no big problems. Shui covered her mouth and laughed. The previous faint worry had already disappeared. Looking at Xiaohua's exhausted appearance, she said, Husband is tired. Why don't you let me accompany you for a walk? Before my husband came, Senior Farong accompanied me to walk around Haoming City a few times. There were many good things in many shops. And it seems that there are also a few shops that sell talismans. According to Senior Farong, they are very powerful. Hearing that there were good things, Xiaohua's heart moved again. However, he immediately rejected this matter and said with a smile, it's better to avoid trouble. The plan now is to cultivate quickly. But Shui understood Xiaohua's heart and nodded. Then she picked out a few difficult parts of the dragon transformation art and asked Xiaohua. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days passed. On this day, Xiaohua was cultivating when he felt that there were some changes in the cave's restriction. When he swept out with his divine sense, a complicated expression appeared on his face. Seeing this, how could Shui not know what was going on? She smiled apologetically and said, Did the people from the Ardent Fire Mountain come? This concubine will cultivate in the cave. This concubine will not participate in the auction. And that's for the best. Xiaohua nodded. However, when Xiaohua was about to get up, Shui smiled and said, Husband, did Fire Qilin come? And he came with Fire Farong. Xiaohua didn't hide it. Then I will go out. Shui said with some hesitation. Xiaohua smiled and said, Everything is up to my wife. When Xiaohua opened the cave's restriction, the first thing he saw was Fire Qilin directly ignoring him and looking behind him. When he saw that there was no one behind Xiaohua, he actually asked, Fellow Taoist Xiao, where is fellow Taoist Shui? Why didn't she come out? Xiaohua was speechless. Just when he was about to answer, Shue Shue's voice was heard. Senior Fire, may I know why Senior is looking for Junior? Hearing Shue Shue's voice, Fire Qilin's spirit was raised even more than when he took a nascent pregnancy pill. His eyes immediately lit up, and he cupped his hands and said, It's nothing. I just came to invite fellow Taoist Shue to participate in the auction. Oh, the auction is a matter for nascent soul seniors. Junior is just an aura-refining disciple, so I won't disturb you. Shue Shue said with a smile, It's just that my husband is a little curious, so he can go. Husband? Who's your husband? Fire Qilin actually asked such a stupid question. It really didn't match a middle-stage foundation-building cultivator. Hee, fellow Taoist Fire, my wife's husband is naturally Xiaohua. Xiaohua said with a smile, He's right in front of you. Oh. Fire Qilin was extremely disappointed, but he still didn't look at Xiaohua. He looked at Shue Shue anxiously and asked, You really don't want to go? I won't go. Shue Shue shook her head, but she immediately smiled again. Junior is at a critical juncture in her cultivation. However, Junior heard that Senior Fire was coming, so Junior came out to see you. Without waiting for Shue Shue to finish, Fire Qilin said in surprise, Fellow Taoist Shui, you came out especially for me? And that's right. Shue Shue nodded. Junior came to thank Senior Fire for begging in front of the 3 elders that day, and also to thank Senior for helping Junior and my husband. After saying that, Shue Shue bowed. No need. Fire Qilin hurriedly reached out to help Shue Shue, but Xiaohua blocked his way. All right, Senior Fire, Junior has already thanked Senior. Junior wants to go back and cultivate. Shue Shue said with a smile. Junior hopes that Senior Fire can find a suitable dual cultivation partner like Junior. After saying that, Shue Shue turned around and entered her immortal's cave, not looking back again. Fire Qilin immediately looked as if he had lost his soul. Looking at Shue Shue's disappearing figure, he opened his mouth but didn't say a word. Fellow Taoist Xiao. At the side, Huafeng didn't say anything. After waiting for Fire Qilin to finish speaking, she cupped her hands and said, Today is the day of the auction. I specially came to invite fellow Taoist Xiao. All right, I'll have to trouble fellow Taoist Hua. Xiaohua smiled and returned the greeting. He took out a magic tablet and activated the Immortal's Cave's restriction. Seeing the Immortal's Cave's door disappear in front of his eyes, Fire Qilin seemed to feel that all hope had disappeared, and there was a disheartened look in his eyes. Seeing this, Xiaohua also felt some sympathy in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist Hua, these few days, my wife has been praising fellow Taoist's benevolence in front of me, and wanted to thank fellow Taoist for his great kindness. Now, she can finally fulfill her wish. Is that so? How did she praise I? Fire Qilin's eyes gave birth to a trace of spirit. Let's go, we'll talk as we walk. Xiaohua said with a smile. He actually patted Fire Qilin's shoulder, and Fire Qilin actually let Xiaohua come closer. Huafeng shook her head as she watched from the side, but what could she say? Arriving in front of Ardent Fire Mountain's Immortal's Cave, a flame-shaped flying magic tool that seemed to be cast from gold and stones stopped in front of the door. The dazzling golden color refracted the glaring sunlight, and in Xiaohua's eyes, it was like a ball of resplendent flame. At the edge of the flying magic tool, there were already several gold core and foundation establishment cultivators standing there. There were also many children who were dressed in embroidered clothes and had solemn expressions. Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait a moment. Arriving in front of the flying magic tool, Huafeng said in a low voice, Great-grandfather hasn't come out yet. We can only go up after he comes out. Okay, Xiaohua agreed and stood respectfully at the side. At this moment, although Fire Qilin wasn't as dispirited as before, he was still somewhat dispirited and listless. It seemed that the words Xiaohua said on the road weren't enough to dispel his infatuation. Not long after, a melodious sound came from inside the Immortal's Cave, and the 3 elders of Ardent Fire Mountain slowly walked out, surrounded by a group of Ardent Fire Mountain disciples. When the 3 elders of Ardent Fire Mountain arrived in front of the flying magic tool and saw Xiaohua, their expressions were somewhat different. Hua Paikong and Hua Yishui coldly swept their gazes over, and Xiao Hua could feel the piercing gaze from afar. Hua Yishui lightly asked, "Xue Xue didn't come?" Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Fire Qilin opened his mouth again. "Okay, great-grandfather knows that Xue Xue is cultivating to break through to Foundation establishment, so she can't come. Foundation establishment is just a matter of raising one's hand and hearing. If she knows, then this old man will let her reach Foundation establishment today." Hua Yishui sneered. Hua Paikong unhappily said, "I didn't ask you, stand aside." "Yes, boy knows." Fire Qilin didn't refute and obediently stood to the side. Xiao Hua apologetically smiled and said, "My junior sister's knowledge is shallow and doesn't dare to take up Ardent Fire Mountain's precious spot. She's also cultivating, so she can't go." And Huishui nodded, looked up, and said a few words. On the flying magic tool, a golden core disciple bowed and said, "Disciple understands." Chapter 2049. Let's go, Hua Zhishan said as he floated onto the flying magic artifact and sat on a jade chair. Xiao Hua and the others also boarded the flying magic artifact. Then, without waiting for Xiao Hua to stabilize himself, the Foundation establishment disciples activated the magic artifact. A huge suction force appeared from the bottom of the flying magic artifact, blooming like a lotus flower. A series of rumbling sounds were heard as the entire flying magic artifact flew up. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, the flying magic artifact didn't fly down the mountain, but straight up. Above the residence of a nascent soul cultivator should be the residence of a spirit-severing cultivator. Could it be? Xiao Hua was surprised, but the flying magic artifact flew up several dozen feet and the mountain became steeper. Although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was rich, the layout was far from that of a nascent soul cultivator's residence. It couldn't even compare to a Foundation establishment cultivator's residence. Oh! Xiao Hua immediately understood. Although Haoming City was one of the 7 major cities in the country of Xi, it could only accommodate nascent soul cultivators. How could a spirit-severing cultivator come to Haoming City? Even if a spirit-severing cultivator came, Reverend Yen Hong would have to go out and welcome them. How could a spirit-severing cultivator stay here? The city lord's residence was more like it. After flying for a while, they arrived at a huge platform that occupied the entire mountain peak. Hua Zhishan's magic artifact rose up, but it didn't land on the platform. Instead, it floated in midair, as if waiting for something. Ding! A loud sound rang out. It was as if there were countless bells. 4 colors of brilliance blossomed on the platform, illuminating the entire sky. The previously unclear sky was now clear and bright. At this moment, Xiao Hua noticed to his astonishment that there were actually around 20 flying magic tools parked around the enormous platform, and every single one of them was unique and extremely strange. When all sorts of magical artifacts appeared, more than 20 powerful divine senses swept out one after another. It seemed like they were spying, but also seemed like they were having a contest. Wang, another beehive-like sound rang out, and the platform began to vibrate. Gradually, the light fog was lifted, and a huge palace appeared on the platform. The palace was carved with pillars, and its style was simple and unadorned. It was very imposing, but in Xiao Hua's eyes, it was a little strange. The pillars of the palace were abnormally thick, and the space was abnormally large. It was actually more than 10 times larger than an ordinary palace. Whoosh! A rainbow flew out from one of the palace gates and landed directly below Mount Hualai's flying artifact, supporting it. However, the rainbow didn't move at all, and the flying artifact didn't move at all. Hua Zhishan took out an oval-shaped badge and threw it into the rainbow. The rainbow emitted a burst of ripples and began to vibrate. As the rainbow shrank, the flying magic tool also began to move and gradually approached the palace. With a light boom, the flying magic tool leaned against a corner of the palace. The palace gates slowly opened, and 2 golden core cultivators walked out and respectfully lined up on either side of the palace gates. "Let's go." Hua Zhishan stood up from his jade chair and walked towards the palace gates. Hua Zhishui and Hua Pekong didn't even look at Xiao Hua and followed him. When Huajishan got off the flying magic tool, the fire qilin and fire hibiscus nodded at Xiaohua and quickly followed him. The golden core disciple that Huajishan sent a message to said, "Wait here, don't move around." Then, the disciple also walked behind Xiaohua and got off the magic tool. Greetings, 3 seniors from Mount Hua. The 2 golden core cultivators who were waiting respectfully were rather polite as they bowed and said, "We're Haoming City's guest elders. We're here to welcome the 3 seniors. Thank you for your trouble." Huajishan saw that the 2 cultivators were at the late golden core stage and didn't dare to be disrespectful. "Seniors, please come this way." The 2 cultivators didn't introduce themselves and only spread out their hands, inviting the 3 elders from Mount Hua to enter the palace gates. Huajishan knew that the guests of Haoming City weren't disciples of Haoming City, but rather, they paid a special price to invite other cultivators to make decisions for Haoming City. Their backgrounds and sects were different from Haoming City, so he didn't dare to be disrespectful and slightly nodded before entering the palace gates. When it came to the fire qilin and fire hibiscus, they were even more humble and bowed, greeting the seniors. Naturally, Xiaohua also hurriedly bowed. The 2 gold core cultivators nodded slightly. When the last gold core cultivator from the Ardent Fire Mountain entered the palace, the 2 gold core cultivators glanced at each other and released their divine sense. After sweeping the palace gate for a moment, one of the cultivators extended his hand and took out a strange-looking Dharma tablet from his bosom. Under the activation of his magic power, it emitted a strange spiritual movement. The cultivator threw the magic tablet into the ground of the palace gates. A multicolored light appeared on the ground, wrapping around the palace gates. When the 2 Jindan stage cultivators walked through the palace gate, the multicolored light suddenly entered the palace gate. Xiaohua only felt a burst of chaos in front of his eyes. The perfectly straight path he saw earlier had already disappeared and was replaced by a long suspended bridge. At the palace gates, after the multicolored light disappeared, the palace gates also disappeared, leaving only Mount Huajishan's flying magic tool floating in the air like a flame. Xiaohua looked at the suspended bridge that Mo Zhao had appeared on and was somewhat stunned. He was now a foundation establishment cultivator and had even been to the core of Mo Zhao's Black Forest. He had seen many incredible things in the cultivation world. However, the suspended bridge under his feet was 10 feet wide and was very transparent. There was a faint brilliance flowing on it. If not for the divine sense, who could see it? This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the entire palace seemed to be a boundless space. This transparent suspended bridge was crisscrossing, and there were thousands or tens of thousands of them. Moreover, under the suspended bridge, there seemed to be a bottomless abyss. Xiaohua probed with his divine sense, but there was no trace of a bottom. Moreover, Xiaohua stole a glance at the golden core cultivator beside him. There seemed to be a trace of surprise on his face. Obviously, even the divine sense of a golden core cultivator could not reach the bottom. Good heavens! The foundation of this Haoming City is too strong, isn't it? Xiaohua's eyes turned rapidly as he looked at the suspended bridge in the space that was almost a ball of thread. 3 seniors, please. 2 golden core cultivators appeared in front of Huajishan and the others. They smiled slightly and led the way. Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoists. Huajishan smiled. In his heart, he was similar to Xiaohua. However, he only looked at his 2 brothers and did not say anything. Although this suspended bridge was invisible, it was slightly soft when one stepped on it. Moreover, unlike other magic tools, it could not carry people. Xiaohua and the others could only cast spells and follow the golden core cultivators in front of them. Chapter 2050. Fortunately, although the atmosphere inside the palace was majestic, it didn't restrict one's cultivation. Apart from the faint sound of the wind outside the floating bridge, there was a kind of huge suction force that even divine senses couldn't escape. Everything else was similar to the outside of the palace. After walking for half the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the group had already arrived at the top of the floating bridge. At this time, the previously empty floating bridge was gradually filled with the silhouettes of other cultivators. Many divine senses also swept over. The divine senses of nascent soul cultivators were like eyes. After sweeping over, it was fine. However, one of the divine senses swept over the group from Blazing Fire Mountain again and again. Not to mention Xiaohua, even Hua Ferong and the others were astonished. At this time, the two golden core cultivators in front of them heard this and took out a magic tablet from their bosom. After activating it, they threw it on top of the floating bridge. Rumble! The entire floating bridge immediately shook. The other half of the floating bridge in front of them rapidly rose from the distance and struck towards them like the tail of a spirit snake. Woo! With a burst of fierce wind, the floating bridge suddenly stopped in front of Xiaohua and the others. Then it began to fall. A burst of light and shadow changed. Before Xiaohua's eyes could react, a fortress-like building appeared in front of him. The two golden core cultivators were standing at the entrance of the fortress. 3 seniors, this is the entrance to Xian Kong Pavilion. Forgive us for not being able to enter. The two golden core cultivators respectfully bowed and said, Senior, you can enter by following the path inside. Okay, Huozhishan only slightly curled his lips. He knew that this was all deliberately done by Haoming City. He nodded and entered first. When Xiaohua entered and saw the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but be moved. He saw that this was a huge palace. In front of him was a path that was dozens of feet long, leading straight ahead. On both sides of the path, there was a huge statue every 10 feet or so. Good heavens! How is this a place where cultivators live? Xiaohua thought. This is probably a palace left behind by those celestials. Xiaohua naturally thought of the huge white bones in his space. If the white bones were to come back to life and walk in this huge palace, they would be able to bring out the best in each other. They would then look like dwarves. Sure enough, the fire Qilin, who hadn't made a sound for a long time and had been focused on Xiaohua's cave, also woke up and released his divine sense. After looking for a long time, he whispered, Ferong, this place seems to be related to my Blazing Fire Mountain. Qilin, Huozhishan in front coughed and scolded, Qilin, don't talk too much. Use your eyes, use your ears, and use your heart. Yes, this boy understood Qilin's voice. Blazing fires of the mountain? Xiaohua's of the blazing fire Qilin, S's fire Qilin. Let's go, Huozhishan called again. His body flew up and slowly floated towards the end of the road. Xiaohua flew in the air, but his divine sense was looking at the huge statues around him. These statues were either ferocious giants or ferocious beasts. They all had frightening faces. Moreover, he didn't know what these statues were made of, but his divine sense couldn't penetrate them. Xiaohua even used his Dharma eyes to secretly look at them a few times. He could see the outlines of the statues, but they were pale. Oh, these statues are actually somewhat similar to the Dharma idol in my space. Xiaohua's divine sense suddenly saw a statue. It was also a human body with a snake tail. However, this human body was a stalwart man. His face was firm and his muscles were bulging. Moreover, he was wearing a strange armor. In his hand was a weapon that looked like a fork. Just as Xiaohua's gaze focused on the statue and wanted to take a closer look, he heard a cold voice from afar. Fellow Taoist Hua, you're really angry. You can even ignore Ai's invitation? Could it be that you think you can exchange that thing for something that you want at the auction in Haoming City? Following that voice, naturally, there was a divine sense sweeping over. Xiaohua's heart trembled. Wasn't this the same divine sense that had swept over everyone on the floating bridge? Oh, isn't this Taoist Blue Feather from the immortal music sect of the Meng Kingdom? Huozhishan's voice sounded. He asked curiously, Fellow Taoist Blue Feather, when did you give me an invitation? Or did you send a disciple here with a token? It seems that I was drinking and chatting with your sect's 2 disciples, Li Qingxiu and Jiming, a few days ago. I didn't hear them mention you? I was the one who sent you a message during the banquet that day. Taoist Blue Feather still didn't appear, but her voice sounded. Oh? Fellow Taoist Blue Feather? Huozhishan interrupted. So it's a message talisman. This old man and the others have been in Haoming City for a long time. Every day, countless juniors would send a message talisman to our blazing fire mountain for no reason, asking to meet us. Why would we care about these boring message talismans? Every day, our disciples would place bets on these message talismans to see who would crush the most. I'm sure fellow Taoist Bluefeather's message talisman is among them. You. Taoist Bluefeather's tone was a little angry. I sent you a message talisman, but you actually dared to let your disciples crush it. Hee, fellow Taoist Bluefeather, Huizhishan laughed. The rule of the cultivation world in the kingdom of Shi has always been to return courtesy with courtesy. If our blazing fire mountain wants to pay a visit, the fellow Taoist of the Imperial Thunder sect will definitely send a disciple of our sect over on the first day. Although we have arranged a time, we can only pay a visit when the fellow Taoist of the Imperial Thunder sect has the time. Otherwise, our blazing fire mountain may be regarded by the Imperial Thunder sect as a sect that doesn't know etiquette and is a low-class cultivator. Oh, perhaps the rules of the kingdom of Meng are different from those of the kingdom of Shi. This old man will go back and take a look. I want to know which disciple, who doesn't know the importance of etiquette, actually dared to crush the message talisman of the famous immortal music sect's Taoist Bluefeather. Huizhishan's last sentence was one word at a time. He especially emphasized the words, message talisman. Ha, Taoist Bluefeather laughed instead of being angry. Brilliant idea, brilliant idea. This old man's trip to Haoming City has really broadened my horizons. When did the blazing fire mountain become so unyielding, daring to sneer at our immortal music sect like a needle hidden in cotton? Fellow Taoist Bluefeather, Huizhishan laughed. Did my brother's words offend the immortal music sect? We three brothers of the blazing fire mountain have always spoken without meaning. Everyone in the kingdom of Shi knows this. Why is it that when it comes to fellow Taoist Bluefeather, it becomes a needle hidden in cotton? If there's a needle hidden in cotton, wouldn't it be obvious with a sweep of your divine sense? Hee. Following the voice, a short and stout cultivator's silhouette faintly flashed in the air above Huizhishan and the others. There was actually a strange ear-piercing sound. Huapai Kong flicked his sleeve, and the silhouette shattered like glass. He sneered. Fellow Taoist Bluefeather's name is not bad, but your appearance has nothing to do with elegance. There's no need to show off here. No matter how elegant I am, I'm still better looking than you three ugly ghosts. Taoist Bluefeather laughed. When your nascent soul formed your body, you didn't even know to modify it a little. You're really embarrassing the kingdom of Shi's cultivators. This old man doesn't want to fix it. So what? Huapai Kong stomped his feet. This old man still wants to use this face to scare people. Third brother, why are you being so long-winded with him? Huizhishan sneered. In any case, is my blazing fire mountain a small sect that judges people by their appearance? You. Taoist Bluefeather was at a loss for words when facing the three elders of the blazing fire mountain. I want to see if you can get what you want in the auction. Don't come begging for I when the time comes. You don't have to worry about that. Huapai Kong sneered. At worst, this old man will take it back to raise my children. Then, Taoist Bluefeather's voice disappeared. The three elders of the blazing fire mountain continued to fly slowly. Ding. Another chime sounded, and a suction force suddenly appeared from the path. Xiaohua was shocked. Just as he was about to move, he heard a faint voice say, "Fellow Taoists, the way to enter the Xian Kong Pavilion is rather special. Please do not resist." Not to mention Xiaohua, even Huizhishan was a little embarrassed and angry. They were just participating in the auction. Although the opponents were all nascent soul cultivators, and the rewards would be plentiful, Haoming City repeatedly played these tricks. They were really petty. However, they had already come this far, and Huizhishan and the others seemed to be unable to turn back. This situation was really annoying. At this moment, the suction force on the path grew stronger, and its direction changed, going straight ahead. Forget it. Huizhishan flicked his sleeves and said coldly, I want to see what tricks Haoming City is playing. As he spoke, light flashed around his body, and only a protective brilliance appeared. His figure gradually flew forward along with the suction force. Xiao Hua and the others naturally followed closely behind. This speed seems to be getting faster. However, as the suction force increased, Xiao Hua and the others' flying speed also increased. In just a few breaths, they had already surpassed the flying speed of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Moreover, their speed was still increasing. The pressure around them also increased. Whoosh! Huapai Kong, who was the closest to Xiao Hua and the others, frowned slightly. He stretched his right hand behind him and gently flicked his middle finger. A meteor-like brilliance appeared, and the brilliance exploded in midair, forming a layer of light that tightly covered Xiao Hua, Hua Hibiscus, and the fire Qilin. Although he felt the pressure disappear, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly in his heart. Previously, when he saw the increase in speed, he was secretly delighted. He practiced the lightning evasion technique, and speed had always been his forte. If he could see an even faster evasion technique after the bright lightning evasion technique, especially if he could experience it himself, it would be even more beneficial to his lightning evasion technique. Unfortunately, Huapai Kong's finger had shattered all of his hopes. Chapter 2051. Let's go, Hua Zhishan said, and his figure floated onto the flying magic tool. He sat on a jade chair and coldly looked into the distance. Xiao Hua and the others immediately boarded the flying magic tool. Then, without waiting for Xiao Hua to stabilize himself, the group of Foundation establishment disciples urged the magic tool. A huge suction force appeared from the bottom of the flying magic tool, and a flame bloomed like a lotus flower. A series of rumbling sounds slowly came out, and the entire flying magic tool flew up. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, the flying magic tool didn't fly down the mountain, but straight up. It passed through Ardent Fire Mountain's Immortal's Cave and many restrictions. Above the residence of a nascent soul cultivator should be the residence of a spirit-severing cultivator. Could it be? Xiao Hua was a bit surprised, but the flying magic tool flew up several dozen feet, and the mountain became steeper. Although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was rich, the layout was far from the residence of a nascent soul cultivator. It couldn't even compare to the residence of a Foundation establishment cultivator. Oh, Xiao Hua immediately understood. Although Haoming City was one of the 7 major cities in the country of Xi, it could only accommodate nascent soul cultivators. How could a spirit-severing cultivator come to Haoming City? Even if a spirit-severing cultivator came, Taoist Master Yao Hong would have to go out and welcome them. How could a spirit-severing cultivator stay here? The City Lord's mansion was more like it. After flying for a while, they actually arrived at a huge platform, directly occupying the entire mountain peak. Ardent Fire Mountain's magic tool rose up, but it didn't land on the platform. Instead, it floated in midair, as if waiting for something. Dang! A loud sound rang out. It was as if there were countless bells. 4 colors of brilliance blossomed on the platform, illuminating the entire sky. The previously unclear sky was now clear and bright. At this moment, Xiao Hua noticed to his astonishment that there were actually around 20 flying magic tools parked around the enormous platform, and every single one of them was unique and extremely strange. When all sorts of magical artifacts appeared, more than 20 powerful divine senses swept out one after another. They seemed to be spying, but also seemed to be competing. Another beehive-like sound rang out, and the platform began to vibrate. Gradually, the light fog was lifted, and a huge palace appeared on the platform. The palace was carved with pillars, and its style was simple and unadorned. It was very imposing, but in Xiao Hua's eyes, it was a little strange. The pillars of the palace were abnormally thick, and the space was abnormally large. It was actually more than 10 times larger than an ordinary palace. Whoosh! A rainbow flew out from one of the palace gates and landed directly below Mount Hualai's flying artifact, supporting it. However, the rainbow didn't move at all, and the flying artifact didn't move at all. Hua Zhishan reached out and took out an oval badge. He casually threw it into the rainbow. The rainbow emitted a burst of ripples and began to vibrate. As the rainbow shrank, the flying magic tool also began to move and gradually approach the palace. Boom! The flying magic tool leaned against a corner of the palace. The palace gates slowly opened, and 2 golden core cultivators walked out and respectfully lined up on either side of the palace gates. "Let's go." Hua Jishan stood up from his jade chair and walked towards the palace gates. Hua Jishui and Hua Pekong didn't even look at Xiaohua and followed him. When Hua Jishan got off the flying artifact, the fire qilin and fire hibiscus nodded at Xiaohua and quickly followed him. The golden core disciple that Hua Jishan sent a message to said, "Wait here, don't move around." Then, the disciple also walked behind Xiaohua and got off the artifact. "Greetings, 3 seniors from Mount Hualai." The 2 golden core cultivators who were waiting respectfully were rather polite as they bowed and said, "We are Haoming City's guest elders. Welcome, seniors. Thank you for your trouble." Hua Jishan saw that the 2 cultivators were at the late stage of the golden core and didn't dare to be disrespectful. "Seniors, please come this way." The 2 cultivators didn't introduce themselves and only spread out their hands, inviting the 3 elders from Mount Hualai to enter the palace gates. Hua Jishan knew that the guests of Haoming City weren't disciples of Haoming City, but rather, they paid a special price to invite other cultivators to make decisions for Haoming City. Their backgrounds and sects were different from Haoming City, so he didn't dare to be disrespectful and slightly nodded before entering the palace gates. When it came to the fire qilin and fire hibiscus, they were even more humble and bowed, greeting the seniors. Naturally, Xiaohua also hurriedly bowed. The 2 gold core cultivators nodded slightly. When the last gold core cultivator from the Ardent Fire Mountain entered the palace, the 2 gold core cultivators glanced at each other and released their divine sense. After sweeping the palace gate for a moment, one of the cultivators extended his hand and took out a strange-looking Dharma tablet from his bosom. Under the activation of his magic power, it emitted a strange spiritual movement. The cultivator threw the magic tablet into the ground of the palace gates. A multicolored light appeared on the ground and wrapped around the palace gates. When the 2 Jindan stage cultivators walked through the palace gate, the multicolored light suddenly entered the palace gate. Xiaohua only felt a burst of chaos in front of his eyes. The perfectly straight path he saw earlier had already disappeared and was replaced by a long suspended bridge. At the palace gates, after the multicolored light disappeared, the palace gates also disappeared. Only the flying magic tool of Mount Hualai was left floating in the air like a flame. This. Xiaohua looked at the suspended bridge that Mo Zhao had appeared on and was somewhat stunned. He was now a foundation-building cultivator and had even been to the core of Mo Zhao Black Forest. He had seen many incredible things in the cultivation world. However, the suspended bridge under his feet was 10 feet wide and was very transparent. There was a faint brilliance flowing on it. If one didn't use their divine sense to scan it, who could see it? This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the entire palace seemed to be a boundless space. This transparent suspended bridge was crisscrossing and crisscrossing. He didn't know how many thousands or tens of thousands of them there were. Moreover, under the suspended bridge, there seemed to be a bottomless abyss. Xiaohua used his divine sense to explore it, but there was no trace of a bottom. Moreover, Xiaohua stole a glance at the golden core cultivator of Mount Hualai beside him. There seemed to be a trace of surprise on his face. Obviously, even the divine sense of a golden core cultivator couldn't reach the bottom. Good heavens! The foundation of Haoming City is too strong, isn't it? Xiaohua's eyes turned rapidly as he looked at the suspended bridge in the space that was almost a ball of thread. 3 seniors, please. 2 golden core cultivators appeared in front of Hua Jishan and the others. They smiled slightly and led the way. Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoists. Hua Jishan smiled. In his heart, he was similar to Xiaohua. However, he only looked at his 2 brothers and didn't say anything. Although the suspended bridge was invisible, stepping on it made one feel a little soft. Moreover, unlike other magic tools, it could not carry people. Xiaohua and the others could only use magic techniques to follow the golden core cultivators in front of them as they moved forward. Chapter 2052. Fortunately, although the atmosphere inside the palace was majestic, it didn't restrict one's cultivation. Apart from the faint sound of the wind outside the floating bridge, there was a kind of force that sucked people downwards. Even their divine senses couldn't avoid it. Everything else was similar to the outside of the palace. After walking for half the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the group had already arrived at the top of the floating bridge. At this time, the previously empty floating bridge was gradually filled with the figures of other cultivators. Many divine senses were also sweeping over. The divine senses of nascent soul cultivators were like eyes. After sweeping over them, it was fine. However, one of the divine senses swept over the group from Blazing Fire Mountain again and again. Not to mention Xiao Hua, even Hua Ferong and the others were astonished. Who is being rude? Xiao Hua frowned as he thought to himself. At this time, the two golden core cultivators in front of him heard this and took out a magic tablet from their bosom. After activating it, they threw it on top of the floating bridge. Rumble! The entire floating bridge immediately shook. The other half of the floating bridge in front of them rapidly rose from the distance and struck towards them like the tail of a spirit snake. Woo! With a sharp gust of wind, the floating bridge suddenly stopped in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Then it began to descend. With a burst of light and shadow, before Xiao Hua's eyes could react, a fortress-like structure appeared in front of him. The two golden core cultivators were standing at the entrance of the fortress. 3 seniors, this is the entrance to Xian Kong Pavilion. Forgive us for not being able to enter. The two golden core cultivators respectfully bowed and said, Senior, you just need to follow the path inside and enter. Okay, Huozhishan only slightly curled his lips. He knew that this was all deliberately done by Haoming City. He nodded and entered. When Xiao Hua entered and saw the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but be moved. He saw that this was a huge palace. In front of him was a path that was dozens of feet long. It led straight ahead, and on both sides of the path, there was a huge statue every 10 feet or so. Good heavens! How is this a place where cultivators live? Xiao Hua thought to himself. This is probably a palace left behind by those celestials. Xiao Hua naturally thought of the huge white bones in his space. If the white bones were to come back to life and walk in this huge palace, they would be able to bring out the best in each other. They would then look like dwarves. Sure enough, the fire Qilin, who hadn't made a sound for a long time and had been focused on Xiao Hua's cave, also woke up and released his divine sense. After looking for a long time, he said in a low voice, Feng, this place seems to be related to my Blazing Fire Mountain. Cough, cough. Huishui coughed and scolded, Qilin, don't talk too much. Just use your eyes, ears, and heart to remember. Yes, boy understands, even though the fire Qilin was a fool, he wasn't stupid. He had just blurted it out and was now on guard. The Ardent Fire Mountain also has such a place? Xiao Hua naturally heard it. These places are probably ancient ruins. Who knows, there might be some secret techniques left behind from ancient times. Let's go, Huishui called out again. His figure flew up and slowly floated towards the end of the road. Xiao Hua flew in the air, but his divine sense was looking at the huge statues around him. These statues were either ferocious giants or ferocious beasts. All of them had frightening faces. Moreover, he didn't know what these statues were made of. His divine sense couldn't penetrate them. Xiao Hua even used his Dharma eyes to secretly look at them a few times. He could actually see the outlines of the statues, but they were pale white. These statues are actually somewhat similar to the Dharma idol in my space. Xiao Hua's divine sense suddenly saw a statue. It was also a human body with a snake tail. However, this human body was a stalwart man. His face was firm and his muscles were bulging. Moreover, he was wearing a strange armor and held a fork-like weapon in his hand. Just as Xiao Hua focused his gaze on the statue and wanted to take a closer look, he heard a cold voice from afar. Fellow Taoist Hua, you're really angry. You can even ignore Ai's invitation? Could it be that you think you can exchange that thing for something that you want at the auction in Haoming City? Following that voice, naturally, there was a divine sense sweeping over. Xiao Hua's heart trembled. Wasn't this divine sense the one that swept over everyone on the floating bridge? Isn't this Taoist Blue Feather from the immortal music sect of the Meng Kingdom? Hua Yishui's voice sounded. He asked curiously, "Fellow Taoist Blue Feather, when did you give me an invitation? Or did you send a disciple with a token? It seems that I was drinking and chatting with your sect's 2 disciples, Li Qingxiu and Jiming, a few days ago. I didn't hear them mention you?" I was the message talisman you sent that day at the banquet." Taoist Blue Feather still didn't appear, but her voice sounded. "Oh? Fellow Taoist Blue Feather?" Hua Yishui interrupted. "Hee, so it's a message talisman. We've been in Haoming City for a long time. Every day, countless juniors would send message talismans to our blazing fire mountain for no reason, asking to meet us. Why would we care about these boring message talismans? Every day, the boys under the sect would place bets on these communication talismans to see who could crush the most talismans. I'm sure fellow Taoist Blue Feather's message talisman is among them." "You." Taoist Blue Feather's tone was a little angry. "I sent you a message talisman, but you actually dared to let your disciples crush it." "Hee, fellow Taoist Blue Feather," Hua Yishui laughed. "The rule of the cultivation world in the kingdom of Shi has always been to return courtesy with courtesy. If our blazing fire mountain wants to pay a visit, fellow Taoist from the Imperial Thunder sect will definitely send a disciple of our sect over on the first day. Although we've arranged a time, we can only pay a visit after the fellow Taoist from the Imperial Thunder sect has time. Otherwise, our blazing fire mountain might be seen as a sect that doesn't know etiquette by the Imperial Thunder sect, an unorthodox cultivator. Oh, perhaps the rules of the Kingdom of Meng are different from those of the Kingdom of Shi. I'll go back and take a look. I'll see which disciple, who doesn't know the severity of the matter and etiquette, actually dared to crush the message talisman of the famous immortal music sect, Taoist Blue Feather." Hua Yishui's last sentence was one word at a time. He especially emphasized the 3 words, message talisman. Taoist Blue Feather laughed instead of being angry. "Brilliant, brilliant. This trip to Haoming City has really broadened my horizons. When did the blazing fire mountain become so unyielding, daring to mock our immortal music sect like a needle hidden in cotton?" "Fellow Taoist Blue Feather," Hua Yishui laughed. "Did my brother's words offend the immortal music sect? Our 3 brothers of the blazing fire mountain have always spoken without meaning. Everyone in the kingdom of Shi knows this. Why is it that when it comes to fellow Taoist Blue Feather, it becomes a needle hidden in cotton? If there's a needle hidden in cotton, wouldn't you be able to detect it with a sweep of your divine sense?" Hee. Following the voice, a short and fat cultivator's silhouette faintly flashed in the air above Hua Yishui and the others. There was actually a strange ear-piercing sound. Hua Pai Kong flicked his sleeve, and the silhouette shattered like glass. He sneered. "Fellow Taoist Blue Feather's name is not bad, but your appearance has nothing to do with elegance. There's no need to show off here. No matter how elegant I am, I'm still better looking than you 3 ugly ghosts." Taoist Blue Feather laughed. "When your nascent soul formed your body, you didn't even know to modify it a little. You're really embarrassing the kingdom of Shi's cultivators. This old man doesn't want to fix it. So what?" Hua Pai Kong stomped his feet. "This old man still wants to use this face to scare people. Third brother, why are you being so long-winded with him?" Hua Yishui sneered. "Anyway, is my blazing fire mountain a small sect that judges people by their appearance?" "You." Taoist Blue Feather was at a loss for words when facing the 3 elders of the blazing fire mountain. "I want to see if you can get what you want in the auction. Don't come begging for I when the time comes." "You don't have to worry about that." Hua Pai Kong sneered. "If worse comes to worst, this old man will take it back to raise my children." Then, Taoist Blue Feather's voice disappeared. The 3 elders of the blazing fire mountain continued to fly slowly. Ding. Another chime sounded, and a suction force suddenly appeared from the path. Xiao Hua was shocked. Just as he was about to move, he heard a faint voice say, "Fellow Taoists, the way to enter the Xian Kong Pavilion is a little special. Please don't resist." Not to mention Xiao Hua, even Hua Zhishan was a little embarrassed and angry. They were just participating in the auction. Although the opponents were all nascent soul cultivators, and the rewards would be plentiful, Haoming City repeatedly played these tricks. They were really petty. However, they had already come this far, and Huozhi Shan and the others seemed to be unable to turn back. This situation was really annoying. At this moment, the suction force on the path grew stronger, and its direction changed, going straight ahead. Forget it. Huozhi Shan flicked his sleeves and said coldly, I want to see what tricks Haoming City is playing. As he spoke, light flashed around his body, and only a protective brilliance appeared. His figure gradually flew forward along with the suction force. Xiaohua and the others naturally followed closely behind. This speed seems to be getting faster. However, as the suction force increased, Xiaohua and the others' flying speed also increased. In just a few breaths, they had already surpassed the flying speed of a foundation establishment cultivator. Moreover, their speed was still increasing. The pressure around them also increased. Whoosh! Huopai Kong, who was the closest to Xiaohua and the others, frowned slightly. He stretched his right hand behind him and gently flicked his middle finger. A meteor-like brilliance appeared, and the brilliance exploded in midair, forming a layer of light that tightly covered Xiaohua, Hibiscus, and the fire Qilin. Although he felt the pressure disappear, Xiaohua smiled bitterly in his heart. When he saw the increase in speed, he was secretly delighted. He practiced the lightning evasion technique, and speed had always been his forte. If he could see an even faster evasion technique after the bright lightning evasion technique, especially if he could experience it himself, it would be even more beneficial to his lightning evasion technique. Unfortunately, Huopai Kong's finger had shattered all of his hopes. Chapter 2053. Putting aside Xiaohua's gloominess, Huozhi Shan and the others were flying faster and faster. When they reached a certain limit, sparks appeared on the light barrier around Xiaohua and the others. Even the nascent soul cultivators' expressions changed. Xiaohua and the others felt as if they had bumped into something and stopped again. It was as if they had broken through an extremely powerful restriction. Xiaohua and the others arrived at another place. Hiss! When Xiaohua came back to his senses, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. At this time, everyone was standing in the void. The void was boundless and showed endless secrets. In the void, there were countless spheres of various sizes. Above Xiaohua and the others, there was a fireball that was tens of thousands of feet large and emitted flames that were hundreds of thousands of feet wide. It was quietly floating. Sky Dao Starry Sky? Xiaohua couldn't help but groan in his heart. He originally thought that his Sky Dao Starry Sky was the only one in the world. However, seeing something similar to the Sky Dao Starry Sky in his own space, he knew that there were many powerful cultivators in the world. It seems something is wrong. Xiaohua was surprised at first, but then he sensed that all the spheres and the starry sky were lifeless. They didn't understand anything at all. They were far from the mysterious changes in his space. Xiaohua's eyes turned and looked at the fire Qilin and the others. Sure enough, it wasn't just Xiaohua who was surprised. Everyone from Ardent Fire Mountain was also stunned. A voice resounded through the entire starry sky. Then, like a curtain being lifted, the entire void disappeared with a whoosh. A bright sunny day appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Moreover, to the left of Xiaohua and the others, more than 20 nascent soul cultivators appeared in the void. Xiaohua followed the light and looked down. Under his feet was the platform that everyone had entered from. Many flying artifacts were quietly parked around the platform. Fellow Taoists, forgive I for being presumptuous. A tall and dignified middle-aged man with a horsetail whisk in his hand and a light golden Taoist crown on his head appeared in the void. He stood at the same level as everyone and cupped his hands in greeting. This is the Xian Kong Pavilion that my Haoming City obtained more than 10,000 years ago. Because the restriction inside is too ancient, it hasn't been completely broken. Until today, only a small part of it can be used. I used the Xian Kong Pavilion as the venue for today's auction. This is where I's sincerity lies. Huopai Kong was the first to sneer. Yen Hong, I didn't come to participate in the auction to be humiliated by your Ming city. Time and time using some restriction magical ability. Do you think that only your Haoming city has ancient ruins from ancient times? Ho Pikong's temper was not good. This was obviously what the other nascent soul cultivators thought as well, so everyone was silent. Reverend Yen Hong wasn't angry. He waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and said with a smile, "If you want to explore the mysteries of the great Tao, you must have great methods. It seems that no one can understand my painstaking efforts." Great Tao? A slightly exaggerated voice sounded. "Yen Hong, you're saying that your Xian Kong Pavilion actually has the mystery of the great Tao." Hee, as expected of the Imperial Thunder Sex Miyu. "Your knowledge is extraordinary." Yen Hong smiled as he looked across from Xiaohua. Over there were several golden core cultivators from the Imperial Thunder sect. Mystery of the great Tao? Hearing me use words, the expressions of several nascent soul cultivators who knew some ancient secrets changed. Yen Hong, this is the legendary Void Palace that was built by the ancient Celestials? The Void Palace that is said to be able to turn one's body into a saint just by peering into its mystery? Alas, when the seniors of my Haoming city obtained this palace, they also thought so. They all wanted to comprehend the great Tao from it and peek into the mysteries of heaven before reaching the great ascension stage. Unfortunately, how could we have such fate? Yen Hong smiled bitterly. This is just a magic tool that looks like an ancient palace. The Xian Kong Pavilion inside has some great Tao, but this starry sky is lifeless. There's nothing to comprehend. Otherwise, how could I dare to take this thing out? Am I not afraid of being distracted by the seniors? In fact, to tell you the truth, I have already asked a senior to look at it. It should be an imitation. It has the shape but not the essence. Oh. The nascent soul cultivators were all regretful and glad at the same time. Although it's an imitation, it may give us a glimpse into the situation of the ancient Void Palace. I appreciate fellow Taoist Yen Hong's painstaking efforts. A handsome female cultivator said with a smile. Thank you for the praise, Fairy Miao Chang of the Five Elements sect. I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Yen Hong patted his chest and smiled. Fairy Miao Chang covered her mouth and laughed. Since we have seen the ancient palace of Haoming City, shouldn't fellow Taoist Yen Hong's auction begin? Yes, I will begin now. Yen Hong clapped his hands and there seemed to be some fluctuations of spiritual power. Then, the void began to change again. Many jade tables appeared in front of everyone. According to the number of nascent soul cultivators, the jade chairs also appeared in front of everyone. In the end, a ring-shaped brilliance connected the jade tables together. Xiaohua was still amazed at first. He couldn't tell whether this thing rising out of the void was Yen Hong's spell or the Xian Kong Pavilion's forbidden spell. However, when the ring-shaped brilliance appeared, Xiaohua understood that these jade tables and chairs were prepared and definitely not born out of thin air. Fellow Taoists, Yen Hong stood at the head of the table without a disciple beside him and said with a smile, Fellow Taoists, you are all nascent soul cultivators of the sects in the three kingdoms of cultivation. I think you are all familiar with each other, so I won't introduce you one by one. As for the fellow Taoists dressed in camouflage robes, I also know their origins. I can guarantee the origin of these fellow Taoists. Of course, if any fellow Taoist has any objections, you can withdraw from the auction now. I and the other fellow Taoists won't stop you. After waiting for a while and seeing that no one responded, Yen Hong raised his hand and said, Fellow Taoists, please sit down. My Haoming City's once-in-a-century auction officially begins. Once everyone was seated, Taoist Yen Hong said, Thank you, fellow Taoists. Our vast brilliant city holds this auction once every 100 years. Firstly, it's a chance for us nascent soul cultivators to exchange cultivation experiences. Secondly, it's a chance for us to exchange cultivation experiences. In view of this, starting from today, within 10 days, my Haoming City will also hold auctions for cultivators of different realms. This is also a scene in my country of Xi. My Haoming City will also profit a lot because of this. Chapter 2054. Fellow Taoist Yao Hong, you seem to have to say this once every 100 years. I'm tired of hearing it. Can you use some new words? A withered cultivator said indifferently. Hee, fellow Taoist Qi Jianghai, you said the same thing last time, right? Reverend Yen Hong didn't seem to be angry and replied, I wonder what good things your Shanghua sect can take out this time? I'm a cultivator of the Shanghua sect, but this time, I did it myself. It has nothing to do with the sect. Qi Jianghai was still as cold as ever. Then, he rolled his eyes and looked at the other old man who looked to be in his 50s. Unlike a certain someone, every time he uses the name of Qi Qiao sect, the things he brings out are worthless. Old man Qi, who did you say used the 7 skills sex banner? An old man around 50 years old answered and slapped the table in front of him. The table instantly turned into fragments. I just sat down and you won't let me feel at ease? Reverend Kuyi. Reverend Yen Hong immediately waved his hand and smiled. Fellow Taoist Qi is only joking. Every time, fellow Taoist will be tricked. Hee, isn't that so? Last time, wasn't it because Kuyi got angry that fellow Taoist Qi took the lead? Reverend Miyu said with a smile. Ever since he appeared in Xian Kong Pavilion, he didn't even look at Xiaohua. It was as if he had never seen Xiaohua before. Reverend Kuyi from the 7 Skills sect seemed to have suffered from Qi Jianghai's trick before. He coldly snorted and sat down. Reverend Yen Hong waved his sleeve and another table appeared in front of Reverend Kuyi. Fine, I won't say anything more. The rules of this auction are the same every year. The only thing that changes is the location of the auction and the positions of fellow Taoists. Reverend Yen Hong nodded. Let's start from my right hand. Fellow Taoist will take out the items one by one and we'll bid. We'll bid according to fellow Taoist's conditions. Reverend Yen Hong glanced at the cultivator in camouflage clothing on his right hand and said, Fellow Taoist, please. Immediately after, Taoist Master Yen Hong sat down. The cultivator in the camouflage robe stood up and a hoarse voice sounded, This thing of mine is a bit strange, so I can't meet you with my original appearance. As he spoke, the cultivator slapped his hand and took out a long sword that was over a foot long from his storage pouch. He placed it on the table and said, This old man obtained this from the Emojiao Black Forest. In my opinion, this flying sword belongs to Changbai sect's Reverend Bright Sword. Immortal Bright Sword of the Changbai sect? Everyone was stunned when they heard this. They all looked at a cultivator with sword-like eyebrows that reached his temples and a very arrogant expression on his face. And what about Xiaohua? Their expressions changed several times. There was no restriction on divine sense in the Xian Kong Pavilion. Everyone's divine sense had already scanned the area when the cultivator took out the long sword. Xiaohua also released his divine sense. He had a deep impression of this long sword. After all, he had died once under that sword. Could it be that there are also nascent soul cultivators in Ink Cloud Black Forest? Xiaohua was shocked and couldn't help but release his divine sense. However, when he saw the appearance of the long sword, he was slightly stunned and showed a trace of understanding. This sword was similar to the sword that had killed Xiaohua, but there seemed to be something missing. But what exactly was missing, Xiaohua couldn't say for the time being. After all, Reverend Bright Sword's so-called sword intent had been stored in Xiaohua's space along with his long sword. Reverend Bright Sword had clearly said that Xiaohua's long sword was not the long sword he usually used. The arrogant cultivator was Changbai sect's Li Tsangqing. When he saw everyone looking at him, he sneered, Reverend Bright Sword is a senior of my Changbai sect. His sword technique is something I can't compare to. Moreover, his Tao is still spreading in my Changbai sect. I can't be sure if this long sword is his or not. Of course, my Tao sect's flying sword is different from the flying sword of sword cultivators. It doesn't have a sword spirit. Even if someone can comprehend the essence of my Changbai sect's sword technique, it would be extremely difficult. Fellow Taoist, is this what you want? Hee, I am not as despicable as fellow Taoist Li says. The Mi-Wan cultivator also replied, I got this long sword. I don't specialize in flying swords, so I brought it out for everyone to see. Perhaps some of you will like it? That's easy. Fellow Taoist, how about we take a look at the long sword? Taoist Master Withered Leaf from the Seven Skills sect said with a smile. His gaze swept towards Qi Jianghai. Of course. The Mi-Wan cultivator slapped his hand and the long sword slowly moved towards Taoist Withered Leaf through the halo on the table. Xiaohua now understood that the halo had such a use. Sure enough, when the long sword arrived in front of Taoist Withered Leaf, he didn't take the long sword from the halo. Instead, he pulled the long sword out of the scabbard and carefully examined it. Then he narrowed his eyes. No one knew what he was planning. I also want to take a look. The Blue Li Sect's Xian Yunzi slammed the table in the distance, and the long sword slowly arrived in front of him. Taoist Withered Leaf seemed to have thought it through and asked in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, how would you like to exchange for this long sword?" Hee, although I don't use the long sword, I am currently refining a magic treasure. I am missing a few materials: owl space gold, tranquil stone, secret gong, fan tong, and Qing Ling moon. If Taoist Withered Leaf has these 5 materials, then this long sword will be yours. What? Taoist Master Withered Leaf was stunned. Owl space metal is an ethereal material. Any magic tool or magic treasure that has owl space metal added to it will not only have its weight reduced by 30%, it will also be able to avoid detection by spiritual sense. Tranquil stone can remove the restrictions of the 5 elements. Secret gong can increase the hardness of magic treasures. Needless to say, they are all rare materials used to refine magic treasures. With just one of those materials, the quality of magic treasures will rise to a new level. Fellow Taoist actually wants 5 materials in one go. Isn't this asking for too much? Forget it, fellow Taoist, I won't be thinking about this long sword. Then how many materials does fellow Taoist have? The Mi-Mo cultivator was not surprised and only asked. I only have secret gong and fan tong, Taoist Withered Leaf said unhappily. I still want to use them to refine magic treasures. Fellow Taoist Withered Leaf, your secret gong and fan tong, can you trade with I? The distant Xian Yunzi said. Fellow Taoist Xian Yunzi is actually interested in these things? Taoist Withered Leaf was slightly stunned and nodded. I have accumulated a lot of secret gong and fan tong to refine magic treasures. I can trade with fellow Taoist Xian Yunzi. But Xian Yunzi immediately sent a sound transmission to Taoist Withered Leaf to discuss the price. The distant Hua Hibiscus sent a sound transmission to Xiao Hua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Taoist Brightsword's long sword is a bidding item. Its price must be known by everyone and cannot be transmitted through sound transmission. The transaction between Senior Withered Leaf and Senior Xian Yunzi is private and can only be known by the 2 of them. In addition, if Senior Xian Yunzi only has 1 or 2 of the materials, he can also ask other seniors for the remaining materials. Similarly, the transaction will be completed through sound transmission. Oh, Xiao Hua nodded slightly. This kind of bidding method guaranteed the completion of the transaction to the greatest extent. It would not make a nascent soul cultivator come all the way here. Sure enough, after Taoist Withered Leaf and Xian Yunzi finished their discussion, Xian Yunzi had a satisfied expression. He raised his head and asked, I only have owl space gold and tranquility stone. Now I still lack Qing Ling moon. I wonder which fellow Taoist has this item? I am willing to trade. Unexpectedly, after Xian Yunzi's voice fell for a long time, perhaps falling into the mountain range of Haoming City, there was still no response. Xian Yunzi was somewhat helpless and almost mocked. Alas, I was also a bit impatient. This Qing Ling moon is a magic treasure. How can it be easy to obtain? If a magic treasure can obtain a drop, it can be upgraded to a spirit tool. Immediately, Xian Yunzi raised his head again and said, Fellow Taoist, I only have these 4 materials. Do you want to trade? The cultivator did not answer directly, but whispered, Fellow Taoists, are you not interested in this flying sword? Hee. The others did not answer, but Li Tsongqing laughed coldly. His laughter did not matter, but Xian Yunzi's face showed hesitation. Forget it, fellow Taoist, I will also take a step back. This flying sword is yours. The Mi-Ho cultivator sighed and said. He took a step back, but Xian Yunzi was somewhat hesitant. What? Fellow Taoist, you don't want it anymore? The Mi-Ho cultivator laughed and said, this flying sword belongs to Taoist Bright Sword. Moreover, looking at the sword body, it is not like what we expected. The sword body is damaged, so I risked my cultivation to find this item. Let's not talk about the refining of the flying sword. I believe fellow Taoist Li knows better than I. Fellow Taoist Xian Yunzi used these 4 materials to return this flying sword. No matter from which perspective, it is a profit. Good. I agree. Xian Yunzi nodded and slapped his hand. He took out a storage pouch and placed it on the halo. The storage pouch slowly turned in front of Taoist Withered Leaf. Taoist Withered Leaf was also ready. He put his hand in and placed 2 small jade boxes. There were some flickering restrictions on the jade boxes. Xian Yunzi did not take the jade boxes. He slapped his hand and took out 2 jade boxes from his storage pouch and placed them on the halo. The 4 jade boxes slowly turned towards the Mi-Ho cultivator. Wait! At this moment, Changbai Sect's Li Sangqing shouted. Sorry, fellow Taoist Li. Taoist Yen Hong smiled and said, fellow Taoist Xian Yunzi has already made a deal with this fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist Li should wait for the next time. Li Sangqing snorted and glanced at Xian Yunzi. Although Xian Yunzi was a cultivator of the Lan Li sect and was not as powerful as the Changbai sect, he was still a nascent soul cultivator. Moreover, he was in the country of Shi and not the country of Meng. Why would he be afraid of him? Rolling his eyes, he reached out and grabbed the long sword in his hand. At this moment, the sword seemed to have been unsealed and was easily held in his hand. Xian Yunzi held the sword in his hand and casually pulled out the flying sword from the scabbard. With a clang, a green sword light flashed through the air. Chapter 2055. The onlookers were envious, thinking that it was appropriate to exchange 4 kinds of refining materials for this flying sword, but Xiao Hua frowned, because this flying sword was absolutely different from the one he had encountered before. Clut, clut, clut. Immortal Yen Hong clapped his hands and said, Great, the first transaction of today's auction is a success, which is quite beyond I's expectation. I hope all of you can get what you want. Next to the Mi-Ho cultivator was an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. He was Immortal He Ping of the Utopia faction. Seeing that it was his turn, he thought for a moment, stood up, clapped his hands, took out a jade box, and put it on the table in front of him. He said with a smile, The Utopia faction doesn't have anything good, but I got this by chance when I was practicing in the Xian Yin Dreamland 100 years ago. Xian Yin Spiritual Grass? Immortal He Ping was sitting next to Immortal Shangqing of the Taiqing sect, a thin cultivator with a sage-like demeanor. We have a lot of it in the Taiqing sect. Yes, I know you have a lot of it, so I don't dare to show off too much. Immortal He Ping was not angry. He said with a smile, It's just that this Xian Yin spiritual grass is too old, so I dare to show it to you. But then I have to take a look. Immortal Shangqing was stunned and said with a smile, My fellow cultivator, please. Immortal He Ping made a magic art and hit the jade box. With a flash of brilliance, the restriction was removed. He clapped his hands, and the jade box floated in front of Immortal Shangqing. Immortal Shangqing raised his hands carefully and opened the jade box. He glanced at it, and an incredible expression appeared on his face. At the same time, many divine thoughts swept over. With a clap, Immortal Shangqing looked at it for a long time and closed the jade box again. He said with a wry smile, My fellow cultivator He Ping, I really admire you. You can find this Xian Yin spiritual grass that is tens of thousands of years old. But what do you want to exchange it for? If I have prepared it in my storage bag, we can do the trade now. Yes, I need 3 drops of red dragon blood. Immortal He Ping said calmly, 3 drops of real red dragon blood. Crimson dragon blood? Taoist Master Shangqing was flabbergasted. My Taiqing sect's guardian python dragon is only at the 7th rank, it can't truly become a dragon. Fellow Taoist, the red dragon you're talking about is at least at the deity transformation stage. How can a nascent soul stage cultivator like me obtain it? Besides, How could there be a true crimson dragon in my Dawn Rain continent? What do you need the scarlet dragon blood for? Fellow Taoist Shangqing, it's I's business what it's useful for. If it's not useful, I'll just keep this profound Yin spirit grass for myself. I don't believe that we can't find the real crimson dragon blood since there are Xianyin spiritual herbs that are tens of thousands of years old. At this moment, a light voice drifted over. Fellow Taoist He Ping, let me ask you something. Do you really want crimson dragon blood? What about the other black dragons and white dragons? White dragon? Xiao Hua originally didn't care, but when he suddenly heard this, he felt his entire body tremble, and even his hair stood on end. He couldn't help but think of Shang Huaming's yellow flower ridge, which was covered in blood. Hee, so it's Fairy Poyu of the Xuanyan school. I'll let you know that the black dragon blood is too tyrannical, while the white dragon blood is too cold. Taoist He Ping laughed. I'm afraid that only the crimson dragon blood is most suitable for I. So it's like that. Fairy Poyu's face showed a trace of disappointment. I have several drops of dragon blood. Yes, I can guarantee that it's the blood of a true dragon, but it's not the crimson dragon's. So it's like that. Taoist He Ping was also disappointed. He whispered, I wonder what kind of true dragon blood you have? Hee, why should fellow Taoist He Ping know? Fairy Poyu shook her head. I can only tell you if fellow Taoist agrees to take a step back. Taoist He Ping closed his eyes for a while, as if he was thinking. Soon after, he opened his eyes and sighed. Forget it. Since ancient times, everything in this world is difficult. I'll take half a step back. Fellow Taoist Poyu, this dragon blood doesn't have to be the crimson dragon's, but it has to be the blood of a true dragon. Otherwise, our deal is off. Wait. Before the overjoyed Fairy Poyu could nod, Qi Jianghai and Taoist Master Withered Leaf both shouted at the same time. Taoist Master Withered Leaf saw Qi Jianghai and angrily said, Fellow Taoist Qi, why are you opposing me again? You also have true dragon blood? What? Withered Leaf, only your 7 possibilities sect has it. Why can't my splendid sect have it? Qi Jianghai bluntly retorted. This is Bright City's auction. As long as I have true dragon blood, why can't I bid? What? You also have true dragon blood? Fairy Poyu almost covered her mouth. Taoist He Ping's face was filled with ecstasy. That's right. I have 1 drop of dragon blood. Qi Jianghai replied. He then looked at Taoist Master Withered Leaf and asked, What about fellow Taoist Withered Leaf? Do you have 2 drops? I also only have 1 drop. Taoist Master Withered Leaf sighed and looked at Fairy Poyu. Fairy Poyu's beautiful eyes wandered around. She had an indescribable feeling as she said, I also have 1 drop. Ha! Taoist Master Yen Hong laughed. Fellow Taoist He Ping, it seems like you won't be returning empty-handed from this auction. Hee, that's right. Taoist He Ping was practically beaming with joy. My only worry is whether or not the 3 drops of true dragon blood of the 3 fellow Taoists are completely different. I only need 2 drops to be similar, so the 3rd drop won't be a problem. My drop is white dragon blood. Fairy Poyu said with a smile. Clang. Xiao Hua's heart jumped. Like everyone else, he looked at Qi Jianghai and Taoist Master Withered Leaf. My drop is also white dragon blood. Taoist Master Withered Leaf said with a smile. Clang. A second loud sound echoed in Xiao Hua's heart. Could it be? Xiao Hua had a trace of doubt in his heart. However, when everyone looked at Qi Jianghai said with a smile, Since fellow Taoist He Ping doesn't care about the 3rd drop, I won't say anything. Then, Qi Jianghai transmitted his voice to Fairy Poyu and Taoist Master Withered Leaf. It seemed like they were discussing something. An entire stalk of profound Yin spirit grass. If the 3 of them were to share it equally, it would be appropriate. The key point was that the profound Yin spirit grass was tens of thousands of years old. Even Taoist Master Pure of the Taiching sect coveted it. They couldn't let it go. Sure enough, the 3 of them argued for a while and seemed to have reached a temporary agreement. They clapped their hands and took out an exquisite jade bottle from their storage pouches. They placed it on the table and flew to Taoist He Ping along with the halo. Xiaohua's divine sense scanned the jade bottle. Unfortunately, there were countless restrictions on it. His divine sense couldn't penetrate it, so he couldn't see what kind of dragon blood was inside. Chapter 2056. Taoist He Ping looked at the 3 jade bottles in front of him and waved his sleeves, seemingly setting up a restriction around him to block all divine senses. Then he carefully removed the restrictions on the outer layer of the jade bottles and scanned them with his divine sense. Joy appeared on his face, and he waved his hand to put them all into his storage pouch. Thank you, fellow Taoists. Who should I give this profound Yin spirit grass to? Give it to Fairy Poyu. Taoist Ku Yi and Qi Jianghai looked at each other. They didn't dare to trust each other too much, so they could only give it to Fairy Poyu first. Damn it, I've really learned something new. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Zhang Yu Tong and Zhang Yu He didn't hesitate to take out a sword cultivation technique for a 6,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass, but they still couldn't get what they wanted. Now, a 10,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass has appeared, and there's even real dragon blood. Speaking of 10,000-year-old spirit grass, the first spirit grass I planted is probably tens of thousands of years old, right? Can I also use a 10,000-year-old spirit grass to exchange for some good stuff? Unfortunately, he only thought about it for a moment before he killed it in his head. There were nearly 20 nascent soul stage cultivators here. Any one of them could easily kill him. If he took out a spiritual herb that they coveted, he would be courting death. With the top-grade spirit stones in my storage pouch alone, I'm afraid I can also bid for a technique that might appear, Xiaohua thought to himself. Great! Taoist Yen Hong laughed again. The second fellow Taoist also got what he wanted, so let's take the next one. Taoist Mi Yu of the Imperial Thunder sect stood up next to Taoist He Ping. She didn't take out anything, but cupped her hands and said, I's item is a set of ancient formations with detailed records. It's called the Capital Star Formation. I also just got it, and I's understanding of formations isn't very good. I studied it for a long time but still couldn't get the gist of it. So, I'm taking it out to exchange with a fellow Taoist who's meditating on formations. Capital Star Formation? Several nascent soul cultivators couldn't help but gasp. Among them, Fairy Fei Yen of the Profound Heaven sect said anxiously, Are you sure it's the Capital Star Formation? That's a great formation with the power to destroy the world. I can't be sure. Taoist Mi Yu looks at the beautiful woman in red clothes on the right and says with a smile, I don't understand formations. Can we take a look? The other 2 nascent soul cultivators also asked. Sorry. Taoist Mi Yu shook her head and said, I don't have any restrictions on this formation, and I don't dare to set up too many restrictions. Therefore, if fellow Taoists don't have what I want, I'm afraid I can't show it to you. What does fellow Taoist Mi Yu want to exchange? Fairy Fian asked with a smile. As long as I have it, I'll definitely exchange it with you. Hee hee. Taoist Mi Yu laughed. Fire essence flame crystal, wood essence flame crystal, earth essence yao milk, water essence ice essence, or metal essence revitalizing essence. All 5 are fine. I only need 3 drops. Ah? Fairy Fian was dumbfounded. She bitterly smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Mi Yu's request is too unimaginable. Although I've heard of the 5 elements essence for thousands of years, I've only seen it in ancient books. I've never seen the real thing. Fellow Taoist wants 3 drops at once. It seems like I have no hope. Soon after, she unwillingly asked, Apart from these, fellow Taoist doesn't have any other plans? Thank you for your kindness, Fairy Fian. Taoist Mi Yu shook her head and said, I am currently lacking this. And Xiaohua understood. He knew that Taoist Mi Yu's lightning escape technique had reached the end of its cultivation. She had no choice but to use these external items to temper her body. Only then would she be able to reach a higher level. Xiaohua himself had earth essence yao milk, but his cultivation completely depended on it. He didn't know what that great sky star formation was, so he naturally couldn't exchange it with Taoist Mi Yu. Hee hee, Sun Ming and Qian Tian didn't even dare to reveal anything, so he wouldn't dare either. The other two nascent soul cultivators also looked at each other helplessly. But then, the Mi-Ho cultivator sitting on the second left of Taoist Yenhong said, "Fellow Taoist Mi-Yu, this old man has 2 drops of water element ice essence. Moreover, I know where the water element ice essence might be found. Would you consider it?" Really? Taoist Mi-Yu was a little surprised. She nodded and said, "If fellow Taoist swears that the location of the water element ice essence is true, I can consider it. Unfortunately, this old man is not interested in your great sky star formation," the Mi-Ho cultivator said regretfully. "I don't know what fellow Taoist Fian of the mysterious sky sect, Taoist Xian Jing of the Kunlun sect, and Jiang Mingzi of the immortal ascension sect have to exchange with this old man." Great. The 3 of them were all happy. They immediately transmitted their voices to the Mi-Ho cultivator and explained their rare items. The Mi-Ho cultivator pondered for a moment and nodded. "Fellow Taoist Xian Jing's item is to my liking. This old man is willing to exchange with fellow Taoist Xian Jing." "And, fellow Taoist." Taoist Mi-Yu's face showed joy and reminded, "You can only tell I the location of the water element ice essence. Moreover, fellow Taoist has to swear that you won't reveal it within 100 years. I'm sorry, fellow Taoist Mi-Yu. This old man can swear that the location is true, but it's impossible for me to not reveal it within 100 years. The Mi-Ho cultivator refused. "How about this?" Taoist Yenhong said with a smile. "Everyone take a step back. This fellow Taoist just has to promise that he won't reveal it within 50 years. What do you think?" But Taoist Mi-Yu frowned and nodded. "That's fine." The Mi-Ho cultivator replied in a relaxed manner. Then, Taoist Xian Jing passed a storage bag to the Mi-Ho cultivator. The Mi-Ho cultivator took it and looked at it. Then he passed a jade bottle with a heavy restriction to Taoist Mi-Yu. When Taoist Mi-Yu gave Taoist Xian Jing an ancient jade pendant, Taoist Yenhong said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xian Jing, can you see if the information recorded in this jade pendant is true?" And, before Taoist Yenhong finished speaking, Taoist Xian Jing's divine sense had already entered the jade pendant. Taoist Xian Jing's face was puzzled at first, then overjoyed, and finally indifferent. He waved his hand and put the jade pendant into the storage bag. Then, he said with a smile, "Yes, fellow Taoist Mi-Yu, although this formation is not the capital star formation, it is similar to it. Thank you very much." "Good," Taoist Yenhong said to the Mi-Ho cultivator with a smile. "Fellow Taoist, you can send the location to fellow Taoist Mi-Yu." After the Mi-Ho cultivator sent the message, he made a heart oath. Before Taoist Yenhong could speak, Taoist Mi-Yu said, "Fellow Taoist Xian Jing, I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if you can tell me what this formation is?" Immortal Xian Jing said with a smile, "I won't tell you the specific name. It's similar to Du Tian, but it's not a star formation, but a defensive formation. Its biggest function is to resist the thunder tribulation." Ah? Not only did Taoist Mi-Yu look regretful, but the other nascent soul cultivators were shocked. Taoist Mi-Yu smiled bitterly and said, "It's a pity that the formation of this jade pendant can't be copied. Otherwise, I will definitely have a backup plan." Taoist Xian Jing said with a smile, "If this formation can be copied, fellow Taoist would have already comprehended it." Taoist Yenhong said with a smile, "If fellow Taoist Mi-Yu's cultivation doesn't break through, where would the thunder tribulation come from? Fellow Taoist Mi-Yu has to give up this thing to be able to cultivate the thunder escape, right?" Taoist Mi-Yu also smiled and said, City Lord is right." Immediately, Qi Jianghai of the Shanghua sect, Xian Yunzi of the Lanli sect, and the others next to Taoist Mi-Yu, all took out their treasures and exchanged them for things they needed for cultivation. Xiaohua was stunned by these things, and he was even more fascinated by them. He didn't know when he would be able to use these magical things. When Taoist Lan Yu of the Xian Li sect stood up, the short and fat cultivator cleared his throat and said, "I came to the auction in Haoming City this time to look for the soul essence of an 8th or 9th grade spirit beast. I don't know which fellow Taoist has this soul essence and can offer a price. If I have the corresponding thing, I will definitely trade. The soul essence of an 8th or 9th grade spirit beast. Everyone looked at each other, and Taoist Yen Hong said with a smile, if fellow Taoist Lan Yu wants to find the soul essence of a spirit beast, I'm afraid you should go to the spirit husbandry sect or the strange beast sect. Perhaps you'll have a better chance. An 8th grade spirit beast is already at the nascent soul initial stage and can already transform. How can there be one on the Dawn Rain continent? Taoist Lan Yu smiled bitterly and said, even if there is one, with the strength of the spirit husbandry sect and the strange beast sect, can they subdue the soul of such a spirit beast? According to what I know, the spirit husbandry sect did something in the Flame Forest swamp a few years ago. They seem to have sent out many disciples, but they still couldn't subdue that spirit beast. What kind of spirit beast is that? Could it be the soul of an 8th grade spirit beast? Taoist Yen Hong looked around and saw that many cultivators were listening attentively, so he asked. The spirit husbandry sect didn't reveal the details. Taoist Lan Yu smiled bitterly and said, only the 4 elders of the spirit husbandry sect know. I can't be bothered to find out. Actually, Taoist Yen Hong hesitated for a moment and said, I guess that all of you have some doubts. May I know why fellow Taoist Lan Yu is looking for the soul of an 8th grade spirit beast? This Taoist Lan Yu was also a little hesitant. Then he smiled bitterly and said, forget it. Since it has come to this stage, I won't hide it from you. I have a damaged spirit weapon and I want to use the soul of an 8th grade spirit beast to repair it. Ah? The eyes of the nascent soul stage cultivators flashed with astonishment, but they didn't show too much shock on their faces. It was obvious that some cultivators had already vaguely guessed it, but they didn't dare to guess too much. Taoist Yen Hong's face showed a hint of understanding and he nodded slightly. Indeed, if you're looking for the soul of an 8th grade spirit beast to repair a spirit weapon, you can. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it at Chidian.com. Chapter 2057. Immediately after, Taoist Master Yen Hong advised again, however, fellow Taoist Lan Yu, have you ever thought that this spirit weapon is only a legend in our Morning Rain continent? Even this poor Taoist has never seen a real spirit weapon. Even the sect leaders of the 3 major sects in the country of Shi do not have a real spirit weapon. Does fellow Taoist Lan Yu have the confidence to repair this spirit weapon? Hee, Reverend Bluefeather laughed. Fellow Bluefeather, you can just say that I's cultivation is not enough and my magic power is not enough. Why do you have to hide it? I also struggled for a long time before making this decision. You flatter me. Reverend Yen Hong laughed. Fellow Bluefeather's success in refining is known to all in the 3 cultivation countries. I only wanted to chat with fellow Bluefeather to see if fellow Bluefeather has any confidence. At the same time, I also wanted to let fellow Bluefeather hear that if they have the soul that fellow Bluefeather needs, they can also trade it with fellow Bluefeather, right? Hee, thank you Reverend Yen Hong. Reverend Bluefeather cupped his hands in thanks. However, from what I know, one of the fellow Bluefeather here really does have the soul of such a spirit beast. It's just that this fellow Bluefeather is unwilling to trade with I. That's the soul of an 8th rank spirit beast. Does our Dawn Rain continent really have it? Reverend Yen Hong asked in surprise. Reverend Bluefeather did not speak, but his gaze was fixed on the 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain. Reverend Bluefeather's gaze did not matter as everyone knew. They all looked at Huazhishan, Huahibiscus, Huachilin, Xiaohua, and the Golden Core disciple. The others were fine, but when Reverend Miyu's gaze swept past Xiaohua, she was startled. She frowned and thought for a moment, then immediately transmitted a message to the disciple behind her. The disciple thought for a moment, then clapped his hand and took out a jade slip from his bosom. After flipping through it, he transmitted a message to Reverend Miyu. At this time, Reverend Miyu's expression became calm as she looked at Huazhishan. Damn, what are you looking at? Huapai Kong felt unnatural under everyone's gaze, he cursed. My big brother is somewhat. Huazhishan's expression was calm, but after hearing Huapai Kong's words, he bitterly laughed. Third brother, don't talk. Then he stood up and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoists, my blazing inferno mountain has indeed obtained the soul of an 8th grade spirit beast. However, I don't wish to make a deal at this time, so please forgive me, fellow Taoist Lan Yu. Then, what does fellow Taoist Huo want to exchange for? Taoist Master Yen Hong didn't ask what the ardent fire mountain wanted to exchange for. He only asked what he wanted. This time, Huo Zhishan did not hesitate and said, I want to find an innate jellyfish. Innate jellyfish? Reverend Yen Hong slightly nodded. His gaze swept across everyone and he said with a smile, it seems that fellow Taoist Huozhi of the Ardent Fire Mountain wants to use the innate true water to promote the cultivation of his fire attribute cultivation method. He wants to step into the middle nascent soul stage as soon as possible. That's right, I was thinking the same thing. Huo Zhishan replied without hesitation, if there wasn't a Xiantian jellyfish, not to mention the soul of a grade 8 spirit beast, even if it was an ordinary item, this old man would not have taken it out. Cough cough, Jiang Mingzi coughed and said, according to this old man's knowledge, innate true water is suitable for a fire attribute body. Why does fellow Taoist want a Xiantian jellyfish? Hee, fellow Taoist Jiang Mingzi, have you forgotten us 3 brothers? Huo Zhishan laughed. I'm afraid innate true water can't satisfy our needs, right? Jiang Mingzi slightly nodded and said no more. Fellow Taoists? This matter involves fellow Taoist Lan Yu and fellow Taoist Huo Zhishan. Who among us has a Xiantian jellyfish? However, no one responded to him. Thus, he helplessly said, fellow Taoist Lan Yu, fellow Taoist Huo Zhishan, I'm afraid you've come for nothing. Hee, no matter. Since I know what fellow Taoist Huo wants, I have a plan. Adept Lan Yu laughed and said to Huo Zhishan, fellow Taoist Huo, can your master let I know which spirit beast's soul it is? Huo Zhishan hesitated for a moment and whispered a few words. When Adept Lan Yu heard this, a look of wild joy appeared on his face and he smiled apologetically, I know. I will think of a way. Taoist Master Blue Feather sat down, and the other nascent soul cultivators stood up one by one, reporting the items that they wanted to trade. However, as the trade progressed, the same situation as Taoist Master Blue Feather appeared, where no suitable items were found. Of course, the previously harmonious atmosphere gradually became tense. Some of the rare items still attracted a lot of bidding, and the scene was somewhat similar to an ordinary auction. Xiao Hua saw this and remembered it in his heart. Indeed, to be able to participate in an auction between nascent soul cultivators like this could really increase one's knowledge. It was especially beneficial for one's future cultivation direction and areas to pay attention to. That's strange. Why are they all things that are rarely seen? But all of these things had a history. What kind of cultivation method is that? Why can't I see a single one of them? Xiao Hua looked and felt a little strange. He was aiming for these 2 items and hoped to obtain some. But looking at the excited crowd sitting on the table, Xiao Hua had mixed feelings. The people sitting in the circle were Haoming City's Adept Yen Hong, the first Mi Yong cultivator, Adept He Ping of the Extreme Happiness sect, Adept Mi Yu of the Imperial Thunder sect, Qi Jianghai of the Splendid sect, Xian Yunzi of the Blue Li sect, Adept Shangqing of the Taiqing sect, Adept Lan Yu of the Xian Music sect, the second Mi Yong cultivator, Fairy Fei Yen of the Profound Sky sect, Li Zongqing of the Changbai sect, Adept Ku Yi of the Seven Ingenious sect, Adept Shui Mo of the Huangdao sect, 3 elders of the Ardent Fire Mountain, Fairy Poyu of the Xuanyan sect, Fairy Miao Chang of the 5 Elements sect, Xian Jing of the Kunlun sect, Jiang Mingzi of the Ascending Immortal sect, the 3rd Mi Yong cultivator, and Adept Qin Yen of the Mo Sang Mountain sitting to the left of Adept Yen Hong. These cultivators were all in the early nascent soul stage. Normally, it was very difficult to see even one of them. But now, they were all alive in front of him. If this young master also had a nascent soul stage cultivator, I'm afraid I would have already taken revenge on the 100 Grass sect. Xiao Hua very naturally aroused a burst of spirit in his heart, secretly encouraging himself. Well, everyone, after waiting for the last Taoist Master Qin Yen of Mo Sang Mountain to exchange for the things he needed, Taoist Master Yen Hong clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Today's first round of the auction ends here. Let's take a break for a moment, then we will proceed to the second round." There is a second round? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. Just when he was puzzled, Taoist Master Yen Hong flicked his finger, and countless spiritual wine and spiritual fruits appeared on the tables of the cultivators. "Fellow Taoists, please eat some spiritual fruits and drink some spiritual wine. I will take you to see this Xian Kong pavilion." With that, Taoist Master Yen Hong took a jade cup, tasted it, and clapped his hands. It seemed to be on the table. Chapter 2058. Therefore, with the activation of immortal Yen Hong's spiritual power, the whole transparent surroundings began to dim again. However, this dim yellow was like the setting sun, gradually diffusing and expanding to the whole space. As the darkness approached, many spheres were revealed. The original dazzling light was now so pale. 10 huge spheres slowly appeared in the distance, and each sphere emitted endless light and heat. However, this light and this heat were like pearls embedded in the night sky, causing everyone to only admire it and not feel any fear. 10 suns. Xiao Hua frowned. Obviously, he thought of the scene he saw when he saw the god's statue for the first time in Shanghuaming. However, before he could take a closer look and see that it was a fireball, the whole starry sky rotated at an extremely fast speed. Countless spheres rushed to his face, and then they swayed and were left behind. There were even many small spheres gathered together, looking like a light mist. When everyone's vision got closer, they were surprised to see that the planet was huge. Right when Xiao Hua was completely infatuated, the starry sky suddenly lit up, and then everyone saw a tiny hill. After that, it suddenly descended as if it was descending from the heavens. Only when they entered the hill did they notice that it was the mountain range of Bright City. With a soft swish, the whole Xian Kong pavilion was restored to its original state, and everyone was still sitting on the platform above the mountain range. Great! All the nascent soul cultivators clapped their hands, and Fairy Miao Chong of the Five Elements sect said with a smile, "It is often said that the comprehension of the way of the heavens can only be comprehended after the Mahayana tribulation. But I didn't expect that. The ancient methods were so mysterious that they could actually store such a way of the heavens in the starry sky and leave it to future generations." Ha! Immortal Ku Yi laughed and said, "Fairy Miao Chang's words are reasonable, but whether there is a way of the heavens in the starry sky or whether it is the work of the celestial beings is still unknown. Moreover, the celestial beings in the ancient times didn't cultivate, which is completely different from the path we cultivators take." Then, the other nascent soul cultivators also talked about a lot of things. Only Reverend Yen Hong smiled without saying anything. Finally, he said with a smile, "Although we can't directly come into contact with the heavenly Tao now, the 3,000 great Taos are what we pursue. To be able to know what the great Tao is, it is no different from pointing out the direction of our cultivation. This is something that is far more useful than any master teacher or secret art." Boom! To other people, perhaps these words didn't mean much, but to Xiao Hua, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Not bad. Xiao Hua's heart surged with monstrous waves. Although I don't have a complete cultivation method, I don't have a direct path to the nascent soul stage. However, I have the heavenly Tao starry sky. This is the cultivation method of the ancient celestial beings. This was the true shortcut to heaven. Why do I have to be restricted to ordinary cultivation? Even if I don't enter the Imperial Thunder sect and don't have a master to guide me, as long as I carefully comprehend the heavenly Tao, I will definitely be able to achieve sainthood. Xiao Hua was in a great mood, and he thought to himself, this auction in Haoming City was really worth it. The knowledge of a nascent soul cultivator is extraordinary. Sainthood is just the cultivation method of the ancient celestial beings. Since the ancient celestial beings have died out, it shows that this method still has some disadvantages. Now that I'm in the cultivation world, I'd better follow the rules here and not be too conspicuous. Xiao Hua immediately thought again. Yes, other people's Tao is other people's Tao. We have our own Tao. Changbai Sex Li Tsangqing said proudly, no matter what Dao it is, as long as we can get it, it's a real Dao. Great, Reverend Yen Hong clapped his hands and said, there are 3,000 great Daos. Just one Dao is enough for us to pursue for a lifetime. Well, fellow Daoists, let's start the second round. Reverend Yen Hong waved his hand and said, the second round is still the same as before. There's no need to follow any order. If any fellow Daoist has something rare, take it out and see if other fellow Daoists are interested. And I'll go first. Reverend Shuemo of the Huangdao sect stood up and clapped his hands. He took out an item and said with a smile, I was traveling in the Lian country 10 years ago and very accidentally found this item in a space that was about to be destroyed. I don't know what its origin is. I wonder if any fellow Daoist is interested. As he spoke, he placed the item on his table. A tortoise shell? Xiao Hua's eyes swept over it and his heart heated up. His eyes couldn't help but stick to it. He had practiced the inscription armor for a long time and had some understanding of the inscription armor on his broken tortoise shell. However, what was recorded on the tortoise shell seemed to be an article and also seemed to be a cultivation method. He still couldn't understand it. If no one bids, or if the bidders don't know what this item is, I'll take it. Xiao Hua thought to himself and prepared to see the situation. He was going to send a voice transmission to Hua Furong and ask her to inform Hua Zhishan. Unexpectedly, before Xiao Hua could change his mind, Changbai Sex Li Tsangqing raised his hand and said, I'm interested in this item. As he spoke, he bid a number of spirit stones. Xiao Hua was stunned and looked at Li Tsangqing in exasperation. He secretly complained, Senior Li, even if you have spirit stones, you don't have to squander them like this. You casually bid a number and this junior will add a bit more. Won't this deal be closed? With such a high price, I'm afraid this junior's storage bag will be emptied. Xiao Hua thought this was an ordinary auction and wanted to pick up a bargain. However, which of the nascent soul cultivators in front of him hadn't lived for thousands of years? Which one of them hadn't experienced much more than Xiao Hua? Following Li Tsangqing's bid, several cultivators once again raised the price. It was too much for Xiao Hua to take in. In the end, Li Tsangqing laughed coldly and named a price, then looked around. Xiao Hua knew this was his last chance. He clenched his teeth and really wanted to take the tortoise shell. However, when he saw Imperial Thunder Sect's Reverend Mi Yu and the other nascent soul cultivators narrowing their eyes, Xiao Hua shrunk his neck and decided to ignore them. Good. Looking around, Reverend Yen Hong clapped his hands and said, This item belongs to fellow Daoist Li. Li Tsangqing proudly smiled and took out a storage bag from his waist. He threw it on the ring of light and the tortoise shell turned towards Li Tsangqing. Immediately, two nascent soul cultivators stood up and took out two items that Xiao Hua couldn't see through. One was a fist-sized black object and the other was a dazzling thin needle. These two items were emitting strange fluctuations of spiritual power. As expected by Xiao Hua, he didn't know what these things were used for, and the others didn't say anything either. They only saw the price of the spirit stones rising higher and higher. Xiao Hua was dumbstruck, and only then did he stop. The spirit stones were given to someone else, and the two items also changed owners. Damn it, this young master was wrong. This young master was wrong and was too unreliable. Xiao Hua sullenly complained in his heart, this young master only knew that there were many good things in this nascent soul cultivator's auction, but this young master didn't expect that each and every one of these old nascent soul cultivators would have discerning eyes. How could they let go of these good things? This young master didn't have any miho or disguise, so how could he dare to bid with them? That's right, along with the increase in cultivation, a cultivator's horizons and experience would also increase. The higher the level of a high-level cultivator's bidding, the more difficult it would be to find good things that others wouldn't pay attention to. Xiao Hua's little abacus would most likely not be as effective in the future. Well, I have been sitting for a long time, so it's time to take out some things. The second Mi-Ho cultivator stood up with a smile. Although he was smiling, his laughter was like the cry of a crow. Fellow Daoist, please. Reverend Yen Hong said with a smile. There was a trace of politeness in his tone. The Mi-Ho cultivator clapped his hands and took out a dozen behemoths from his storage bag. He threw them into the ring of light and said with a smile, "This old man went to Emojiao Black Forest a few days ago and didn't have any harvest. These things are all picked up, so it's not a wasted trip." Xiaohua's divine sense swept over and was surprised. At the same time, he was surprised because the dozen behemoths were actually Emojiao. "A fellow Taoist, you are really lucky," Reverend Yenhong said with a smile. "It is said that a lot of fellow Taoists were killed in Emojiao Black Forest last time. I didn't expect fellow Taoists to return with a full load. These Emojiao corpses have always been eaten by Emojiao himself. It is very difficult for us to get them." Reverend Yenhong was right. The 3 Emojiao corpses that Zhu Qinghe gave to Qin Yi and the others were too small to be compared with the dozen Emojiao corpses in front of them. Of course, they couldn't be compared with the Emojiao corpses in Xiaohua's space. Yes, this old man was lucky enough to be in a safe place in Emojiao Black Forest. By the time I made my move, I thought it was already very early. Neither the giant ink puppets nor the ink puppets had made a move. However, all that was left were the corpses of the ink puppets. There was not even a single giant ink puppet left. The cultivator said with a smile, "Oh my, this guy isn't the nascent soul cultivator who chased me that day, is he?" Xiaohua secretly shrank his neck and rejoiced. "Fortunately, I changed my appearance that day. This guy didn't recognize me." "Fellow Taoists, this old man has left enough Emojiao corpses for myself, so I won't be unreasonable. These dozen Emojiao corpses will be sold together. The fellow Taoist who offers the highest price will get them." The Mi-Ho cultivator said loudly. "Good." Reverend Withered Leaf shouted and reported the number of spirit stones first. Immediately, Huizhishan, who had been silent all this time, also raised the price. "These Emojiao corpses? Do they have any special uses?" Seeing that all the nascent soul cultivators were bidding, Xiaohua muttered to himself. He thought for a moment and whispered to Huafurong, "Fellow Taoist Hua, I really don't understand. These Emojiao corpses must be the Emojiao from Emojiao Black Forest, but what is so special about them? Why would a group of nascent soul cultivators fight over it?" Chapter 2059. Huafurong smiled apologetically and replied, "This? I don't know either. I can ask my great-grandfather. However, in my opinion, fellow Taoist Xiao shouldn't have any ideas about this thing." I understand. I'm just curious." Xiaohua replied naturally. Huafurong replied to Huapai Kong immediately after Huafurong replied. Huafurong then explained to Xiaohua, "I heard from my great-grandfather that this Emojiao has many benefits. Its skin can be used to make leather armor and its bones can be used to refine weapons. Its 2 greatest benefits are its inner core and brain." Xiaohua was slightly stunned and asked curiously, "Are they Emojiao's inner core and brain?" Emojiao grew up in the Black Forest with a lot of ink sand. Emojiao grew up in the Black Forest and inevitably accumulated ink sand in his body. The inner core is the accumulation of ink sand and has been refined by Emojiao since he was born. Almost every Emojiao has an inner core. If Emojiao wants to form his core, it will be formed on the inner core formed by ink sand. Huafurong continued, "Ink sand can corrode true origin, so the inner core of Emojiao can corrode true origin as well. The inner core of Emojiao is a powerful weapon in the hands of a cultivator to break restrictions." "I see." Xiaohua suddenly understood. Then a thought came to his mind. Since the inner core of Emojiao can break restrictions, then the seal can also be broken? The seal on my middle dantium. If it is broken, I'm afraid it will be on the inner core of Emojiao. Huafurong did not know what Xiaohua was thinking and continued, "As for the brain of Emojiao, if it is consumed with a secret technique, it will have a mysterious effect on the sensitivity of the 5 senses. This is especially so for a secret technique that works on the 5 senses. This brain is the best item." "Oh, I understand." Xiaohua nodded slightly and asked naturally, "It seems that Senior Hua also knows this secret technique." "Yes, it should be." Huafurong smiled and said, Otherwise, my great-grandfather wouldn't have bid. The cultivators who had bid earlier were obviously embarrassed. Gradually, only Immortal Blue Feather of the Immortal Music Sect and Hua Zhishan of the Ardent Fire Mountain were still bidding. The cultivators from the 3 cultivation sects of the country of Shi and the large sects of the Meng country and the Lian country also withdrew. It seemed like it was not worth it for them to invest so many spiritual stones on Mo Zhao's corpse. Taoist Blue Feather, Hua Zhishan transmitted, "If I don't give you my essence, will you fight me to the end?" Hee, not at all. Taoist Blue Feather smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'm sure you know that I'm good at artifact refinement, and one of my divine abilities requires the brain of Mo Zhao's corpse to be perfected. Moreover, Mo Zhao's bones are the best material for repairing spiritual weapons. How can I not be tempted? How about this?" Hua Zhishan hesitated for a moment before replying, "If you give me some leeway on Mo Zhao's corpse, I will also give you some leeway on the innate jellyfish." Fellow Taoist Hua, you're wrong. Taoist Master Blue Feather shakes his head and says, "I don't know the whereabouts of that innate jellyfish I don't know when I'll trade with you." Hua Zhishan rolled his eyes and says helplessly, "How about this? I do have some clues about the innate jellyfish, but the 3 of us are unable to catch it. If fellow Taoist is interested, I'll send you a message when the time comes and we'll go together. If we succeed, I'll consider exchanging your soul for something else. How about that?" Taoist Master Blue Feather thought for a moment before withdrawing from the bidding, and Hua Zhishan got his wish of getting the dozen or so Mo Zhao's corpse. Seeing Hua Pai Kong beaming with joy, Xiao Hua transmitted his voice to Hua Farong and says, "Fellow Taoist Hua, if I ask the 3 elders to trade for the secret technique of using Mo Zhao's brain, what will the success rate be?" Hua Farong frowned and looked at Xiao Hua's face and asked, "Does fellow Taoist Xiao want such a secret technique?" Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I can't say for sure. I don't know the value of this secret technique." Hua Farong is in a difficult position and says, "Allow me to find time to ask great-grandfather." "Thank you, fellow Taoist Hua." Xiao Hua faintly smiled, then looked towards the field and asked with some surprise, "This Xiao still doesn't understand. Why is it always a strange object? Could it be that there are no cultivation techniques, talisman crafting techniques, or artifact crafting techniques?" Hee, so fellow Taoist Xiao is interested in these. Hua Farong smiles and says, "Don't worry, those are all at the end." Sure enough, just as Hua Hibiscus said, after a few more rounds, cultivation methods began to appear. After more than 10 rounds, Xiao Hua lost his patience and saw Fairy Poyu stand up. She clapped her hand and took out a black crystal. She placed it on the table and said, "Dozens of years ago, this servant participated in the battle of the Imperial Demon Valley for the first time and was lucky enough to kill a demon cultivator. I obtained this magic slip from that demon cultivator. Inside this magic slip is a body refining technique from the devil realm. This servant naturally has no use for the devil sex techniques. Today, I will take it out and see if any fellow cultivator needs it." "Very good." Xiao Hua was unable to contain his joy when he heard that a body refinement and bone cultivation technique had indeed appeared during the auction, and he hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Hua Farong. "Fellow Taoist Hua, I'll have to trouble you to report to Elder Hua that this body refinement technique is something that I, Xiao, wish to obtain." Okay, Hua Farong is happy for Xiao Hua. She quickly sends a message to Hua Zhishan. Hua Zhishan thinks for a bit and asks Xiao Hua, "What do you want this for?" "Junior, once practiced a body refinement technique, but that cultivation method was incomplete, and after practicing it for a long time, I ended up with nothing. Because of this body refinement technique, Junior benefited a lot, so I want to continue practicing it." Xiao Hua easily found a reason. This is a demon world cultivation technique. Can you practice it?" Hua Zhishan scolds. "Besides, do you have devil sense? Can you read the magic slip?" This. Xiao Hua is stunned. "All you have to do is to cultivate your own cultivation method properly. This isn't something you can use." Hua Zhishan says coldly, "Don't waste your hard-earned spirit stones." "But, Elder Hua." Xiao Hua isn't willing. He sends a message, Junior might not be able to understand it, but I can ask the seniors in the sect. I'm sure Master Me you would be willing to interpret it for me? How could that be? Hua Shan says impatiently. Fine, since you want it, this old man won't stop you. How many spirit stones do you have? If it was something else, this old man can pay you some, but this old man won't give you even half a spirit stone. Xiaohua looks around and sees that no one is bidding. He is secretly happy. He knows that demon world cultivation techniques aren't suitable for nascent soul cultivators of the cultivation world, so no one will care. Thinking for a bit, he bids a spirit stone that isn't too high, but it's definitely not a spirit stone that an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator can afford. Chapter 2060. Sure enough, Hua Shan was surprised and looked at Xiaohua. The Imperial Thunder Sect is truly rich. I wouldn't dare, this is Junior's private savings. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. At this time, Fairy Poyu said regretfully, so no fellow Taoist is interested, then? Before she could finish, Hua Shan smiled. Fairy Poyu, this is a rare transaction, how can this old man not give you face? This old man wants it. Then he gave a price that was neither high nor low. Many thanks, fellow Taoist Hua. Fairy Poyu smiled as if she had gained some face. Taoist Yen Hong also smiled. If no other fellow Taoist bids, then this item is Hua Shan's. Hearing these words, Xiaohua's little heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Wasn't the purpose of his coming here the bone tempering technique? The Devil Realm's cultivation method was naturally useful, and since Buddhist sense was the nemesis of devil cultivators, he should be able to examine it. But at this time, a third cultivator spoke, so Hua Shan is also interested in this item. This old man thought only I liked it. Then he began to raise the price. Hua Shan couldn't see who this cultivator was, so he didn't hold back and slowly added spirit stones until Xiaohua's bid was finished. He even added a few more spirit stones, but the Mi Lu cultivator still calmly bid as if he was determined to get this magic slip. Fine, this old man will raise the price one last time. Hua Shan glanced at Xiaohua and gave a price that was about the same as the spirit stones in Xiaohua's storage bag. If fellow Taoist raises the price again, this old man will have to retreat. How can I disappoint fellow Taoist Hua? The Hua Shan continued to raise the price by a large amount. On the other side, Fairy Poyu was overjoyed. She didn't think that a useless item from the Devil Realm would be exchanged for so many spirit stones. Hua Shan said helplessly, all right, this Mo bamboo slip belongs to you. Sigh. Xiaohua's heart was like dead ashes right now. He thought he had enough spirit stones in his storage pouch, but even though Hua Shan, for whatever reason, added so many spirit stones in the end and pushed Xiaohua to his limit, he still lost to the Mi Yao cultivator. Moreover, from the tone of the Mi Lu cultivator, it seemed that he had more spirit stones than this. What a pity, Xiaohua was truly speechless. All right, Fairy Poyu has also gained a lot. Taoist Master Yen Hong stood up and said with a smile, does anyone else have anything else? If you don't, then this auction is over. Sigh, returning empty-handed, Xiaohua howled, preparing to stand up. At this time, Taoist Master Bluefeather, who had been rather lively just now, stood up in embarrassment. He clapped his hands and took out a black magic slip. He said embarrassedly, this old man didn't participate in the battle of the Imperial Devil Valley last time. However, it is said that this item came from the Imperial Devil Valley during the battle. I won't hide it from everyone. This Mo bamboo slip contains a refining technique from the Devil Realm. It can refine a devil treasure? Taoist Master Withered Leaf shouted. Why didn't you take out such a good item earlier? Hee, Taoist Withered Leaf misunderstood. Taoist Master Bluefeather laughed. When I obtained it, it was still in good condition. However, for some reason, it was heavily damaged. It must have been damaged during the battle. I was careless and fell for it. I originally didn't want to take it out, but after thinking about it, this is a Mo bamboo slip. Since Fairy Poyu can take it out, I might as well take it out and embarrass myself. I'll say this in advance. This refining technique is different from my Dawn Rain Continent's refining technique, and it's heavily damaged. I'm afraid it can't be refined into a devil treasure. If any Taoist is interested, you can bid. This old man will naturally bid. Taoist Master Withered Leaf shouted without hesitation, this old man will naturally bid. Since Taoist Master Withered Leaf is interested, I can't fall behind. Taoist Master Shuemo laughed. Then, the two increased the price bit by bit, as if they were testing each other. Xiaohua, why don't you want to participate? Huo Shan glanced at Xiaohua and transmitted his voice with interest. No need, Xiaohua wasn't in a good mood. He wanted the refining technique. After all, he had the Devil Spear tip and Devil Spear shaft in his space. However, Taoist Master Bluefeather had clearly said that the refining technique was damaged and couldn't be refined into a devil treasure. Why should he make trouble for himself? Wasting his own spirit stones for no reason? Oh, then you'll have wasted your trip. Huo Shan said, intentionally or otherwise. Xiaohua's eyes turned. He didn't understand what Huo Shan meant, but after thinking for a moment he transmitted his voice. Yes, Senior Huo's words are reasonable. This junior can't come here for nothing. Since this item is also a devil slip, then Senior Huo, please bid. This junior really wants to see what this devil slip is. Huo Shan saw that Taoist Master Shuemo and Taoist Master Withered Leaf were starting to slow down the bidding and said calmly, you seem to be very interested in the items of the Devil Realm. Yes, this junior heard about the Battle of Imperial Devil Valley. Moreover, I fought against the cultivators of Heavenly Demon Sect and obtained some items of Devil Cultivators. I am indeed curious about the Devil Realm. Xiaohua replied after thinking for a moment. Is that so? Huo Shan nodded. I hope you're telling the truth. At this time, Taoist Master Shuemo and Taoist Master Withered Leaf seemed to have reached the end of the bidding and Taoist Master Withered Leaf withdrew. This old man wants to see what this devil slip is. Huo Shan smiled. Taoist Master Shuemo was stunned and asked curiously, Taoist Hua, what do you mean? Your Blazing Fire Mountain doesn't specialize in refining tools. Who said my Blazing Fire Mountain doesn't refine tools? Huo Shan smiled. My Blazing Fire Mountain's tool refining techniques are famous in the state of Xi. Taoist Master Shuemo looked at Huo Shan and then at Taoist Master Bluefeather, slightly curling his lips. When Huo Shan was bidding for the Devil Realm's body refining techniques, many nascent soul cultivators had seen some clues. Now that Huo Shan had suddenly joined the bidding, how could Taoist Master Shuemo not be suspicious? Forget it, Taoist Master Shuemo flicked his sleeve and said, this old man still needs to keep his spirit stones for my own use. I'll leave this devil slip to Taoist Hua. Taoist Master Bluefeather seemed to have misunderstood Huo Shan and smiled. Many thanks for Taoist Hua's support. She then sent a few voice transmissions and passed the devil slip to Huo Shan on the Ring of Light. Huo Shan didn't expect such an outcome and went with the flow. He smiled and said a few words to Taoist Master Bluefeather and placed a storage pouch on the Ring of Light. Very good. Seeing Huo Shan and Taoist Master Bluefeather put away their items, Taoist Master Yen Hong stood up again and clapped his hands, saying, this auction has come to a successful conclusion. My Haoming City has prepared spirit wine. Fellow Taoists, please send your disciples back. Let's drink and chat. Thank you for your trouble, Taoist Master Yen Hong. All the nascent soul cultivators stood up and cupped their hands with a smile. Taoist Master Yen Hong cast a spell again and several spheres several feet in size appeared under each table. Then, these spheres carried the cultivators like meteors and streaked across the space, quickly flying to different places. The 20 cultivators disappeared in a moment. A dot of light gradually enlarged in front of Xiaohua and the others. When it got closer, it was actually a square several feet in size. It was like a door, emitting a dazzling brilliance. The 2 cultivators who had sent them here stepped out of the door and said loudly, 3 seniors, please follow us. Hua Peikong laughed and said, damn, this Haoming City is really full of tricks. When the 2 entered, Xiaohua and the others' eyes flashed. They saw that they were standing at the entrance of the palace. Hua Zhishan's flying magic tool was not far ahead. The two cultivators respectfully accompanied Hua Peikong and said, 3 seniors, juniors will immediately send seniors to the city lord's mansion for the banquet. Thank you. Hua Zhishan turned to the Golden Core disciple and said, you can go back. The banquet in Haoming City will take a few days and nights. Yes, disciple obeys. The Golden Core cultivator bowed without hesitation and walked towards the flying magic tool. Hua Zhishan looked at Xiaohua and took out a jade box. He handed it to Xiaohua and said, this is what you wanted. This old man was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. Many thanks, Senior Hua. Xiaohua quickly handed over a storage bag filled with spirit stones to Hua Zhishan. Hua Zhishan took it without hesitation and said, this old man has already done what he promised you and has already given your gift to Furong. Once you return to the cave, I will give it to you. If fate wills it, this old man welcomes you to Hua Zhishan as a guest. Hua Zhishan had been indifferent to Xiaohua since that incident. Now, he actually invited Xiaohua to be a guest. This was beyond Xiaohua's expectations. Xiaohua quickly bowed and said, many thanks for senior's care. If this junior has the opportunity, he will definitely come to Hua Zhishan to visit senior. You can go now. Hua Zhishan turned to leave. Great-grandfather. At this moment, Hua Furong called out and quickly walked to Hua Zhishan's side. After Hua Zhishan heard this, he frowned and looked at Xiaohua a few times before shaking his head at Hua Furong. But Hua Furong was still unwilling and gently pulled his robe as if she was acting coquettishly. Hua Zhishan then looked at Hua Peikong. Hua Peikong also had a helpless expression. Hua Zhishan then took out a jade slip from his storage bag and gave it to Hua Furong. Hua Furong then took out a jade slip from her storage bag and gave it back to Hua Zhishan. Xiaohua was puzzled, but in his heart, there was a trace of understanding. Sure enough, when he followed Hua Hibiscus and the fire Qilin onto the flying magic tool, Hua Hibiscus handed the jade slip to Xiaohua with a smile and said, it's all right, fellow Taoist Xiao. Fortunately, I didn't let you down. I've helped you obtain this secret technique. Chapter 2061. Thank you, fellow Taoist Furong. Xiaohua was overjoyed. He took it and carefully put it into his space. No need to thank me. This is my thanks for saving my life. Hua Furong smiled. However, according to what I know, what grandfather gave you was my Blazing Fire Mountain's fire controlling technique. It should be much more powerful than this secret technique. If it were me, I would definitely choose the fire controlling technique. Xiaohua understood that Hua Shrouded Mountain must have seen that he knew some Madhi True Fire and wanted to use the fire controlling technique to thank him. This could be said to be tailor-made and most suitable for him. However, he wanted this secret technique. No wonder Hua Shrouded Mountain refused first. I didn't know beforehand. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Unfortunately, grandfather said that he could only give you a jade slip. Hua Furong said regretfully. It's already very good. Xiaohua smiled. When they reached Hua Shrouded Mountain's cave, the flying artifact stopped. Everyone got off and Xiaohua bid farewell. Hua Furong smiled. If fate wills it, I really hope that fellow Taoist Xiao will come to Hua Shrouded Mountain as a guest. I definitely will. Xiaohua smiled. Just as he was about to leave, the silent fire Qilin asked, fellow Taoist Xiao, I wonder, when will we be able to see fellow Taoist Xue? If fellow Taoist Xiao comes to Hua Shrouded Mountain as a guest, you must bring fellow Taoist Xue. We'll see. Xiaohua really couldn't answer this infatuated fellow Taoist. He cupped his hands and quickly flew down the mountain range of Haoming City. On the way, Xiaohua still thought to himself, since they want to invite me to Hua Shrouded Mountain, they didn't even give me a communication talisman. How is that sincere? Forget it, I'm just a foundation establishment cultivator now. In the eyes of nascent soul cultivators, I'm just a child. It's fine if I don't go. Xiaohua's thoughts were somewhat wronged by the ardent fire mountain. Not to mention inviting a foundation establishment cultivator, even a golden core cultivator would only be invited with a single sentence. Could it be that the ardent fire mountain would send a communication talisman in person? As for Hua Furong, She wanted to give him a communication talisman. But with the matter of matchmaking in Shrouded Mountain, how could she have the face to do something so meaningless? There was also a fire Qilin at the side, and he only had one sentence. Can I see fellow Taoist Xiao when you're suitable? Even if Hua Hibiscus wanted to give it to him, she couldn't. However, Xiaohua had neglected the fact that he still had a keepsake from the Ardent Fire Mountain in his storage bag. When he returned to the cave, all the restrictions were more or less in place. The pill liquid on the pill furnace was still slowly being refined. What comforted Xiaohua the most was that Xue Xue was cultivating with her eyes closed, completely ignoring the outside world. Clearly, she was cultivating the dragon transformation art. People are indeed different when compared to others. Xiaohua sighed. It had only been 10 days, and Xue Xue was already able to practice the dragon transformation art. She was much stronger than him. I wonder how Xiao Mao from Xuanyan School is doing. Have you also built your foundation? Xiao Huan naturally thought of Xiao Mao, who had the same surname as him. He thought of how Xiao Mao bowed down and called him Big Brother. The last time he received news of Xiao Mao, he was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Perhaps he should be in the foundation building realm now? Soon after, Xiaohua found another quiet room and separated himself from Xue Xue. With a wave of his hand, Hua Furong's jade slip was taken out. He immersed his divine sense into it and carefully read it. After a long while, Xiaohua could not help but frown. The secret technique in the jade slip was very complete, and there was nothing missing. However, it was obvious that this secret technique was only an auxiliary technique. It could only be used to use Mo Zhao's brain when he was cultivating some kind of sensory divine ability. It could not be used alone. In other words, if Xiaohua was cultivating a sensory divine ability, such as heaven's eyes, heaven's ears, heaven's smell, and other similar techniques, he could use this secret technique. With the help of Mo Zhao's brain, it would have a miraculous effect. I still can't use it. Xiaohua racked his brains, but he could not think of any techniques that could be used to cultivate his eyes, mouth, nose, and ears. If he forced himself to say it, his Dharma eyes could be counted as one, and this Dharma eyes. Xiaohua did not have any techniques for now. Let's put it aside first. Xiaohua smiled bitterly and put the jade slip into his space. He thought to himself, it seems that I didn't gain anything from this trip other than knowledge and experience. Forget it, let's take a look at the so-called refining techniques of the devil realm. Hopefully, my Buddha's consciousness can't be used. With a wave of his hand, a black jade slip appeared in Xiaohua's hand. Looking at the jade slip, Xiaohua had a feeling of déjà vu. This jade slip was like a black stone. It was extremely deep inside, and light seemed to be unable to reach the bottom. Moreover, when he looked at this black stone, he seemed to have a feeling of dizziness, as if he was going to be sucked into it. Strange, Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. This young master seems to have never seen this thing before. Could it be that I saw it before my Naiwan palace was sealed? Could it be that this young master also participated in the battle of the Imperial Demon Valley? Thinking about this, Xiaohua probed with his divine sense. Sure enough, this jade slip was like a stubborn stone. It was very tight, and his divine sense could not penetrate it at all. A nascent soul cultivator probably has other methods, or perhaps it's the so-called devil consciousness. As Xiaohua pondered, he opened his Dharma eyes. In his Dharma eyes, the Mo bamboo slip was like a small ball of pitch-black fog, but it also seemed like there were many black threads entangled together. It fluttered and became a mess. The devil realm naturally also has heaven and earth spiritual qi. Xiaohua closed his Dharma eyes and pinched his chin. He thought, the heaven and earth spiritual qi used by the people of the devil realm should be this kind of pitch-black thread. It's probably devil qi. But why doesn't the devil artifact have this kind of devil qi? I'm afraid it's because of the refining techniques of the devil realm. After looking at the jade slip enough, Xiaohua released his Buddha's consciousness. Sure enough, under the Buddha's consciousness, the jade slip was like a paper window. With a little attack, it broke through the cocoon. Sure enough. Xiaohua's heart was just happy for a moment, but he was immediately attacked by the miserable state inside the jade slip. This magic slip was extremely similar to the jade slip. They both recorded words, but although Xiaohua still didn't understand these words, the words inside the magic slip were already fragmented. Large pieces of cracks were everywhere, and large pieces of the words were missing. Only the first part could barely be seen clearly and could be considered complete. Like I said, wanting to get good things from a nascent soul cultivator is really tantamount to snatching food from a tiger's mouth. There's nothing to think about at all. Xiaohua curled his lips and threw the jade slip into the space. In the future, it's better to wait until I have the strength or something like a secret auction before I participate. Otherwise, it'll only be in vain. But immediately, Xiaohua's heart was unwilling. Since there were some things, then he had to see what they were. Perhaps they could be of some use? Thinking, Xiaohua looked at Xue Xue's situation again. He closed the cave and flew down alone towards the Qi refining cultivator's residence. A moment after Xiaohua flew away, a figure appeared in the cave not far from Xiaohua. It was Yanyu. Chapter 2062. Didn't I say that Fiery Fire Mountain is just repaying a debt of gratitude? They can't protect you forever. After all, you're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Since you were able to participate in the auction of nascent soul cultivators, your storage pouch must have been replaced with something that even golden core cultivators can't covet. I'm afraid they'll all change owners very soon. Yanyu quietly flew up and laughed inwardly. If I didn't know your background, who would have thought that you, an early-stage foundation building cultivator, would actually have a storage pouch of a golden core cultivator? You can actually have something that nascent soul cultivators bid on? Although Xiaohua released his divine sense, he didn't expect that there would actually be people watching him in Haoming City. Therefore, he only focused on sizing up the surrounding scenery. The residence of aura refining cultivators was the largest in Haoming City. Their Immortal's Cave was obviously much smaller than that of foundation building cultivators. Moreover, it was also much more crowded. Although there were many spiritual plants, spiritual trees, and other things, they were a bit more common. Of course, there was also a difference: there were more city guards. The city guards wore armor and held long swords in their hands. From time to time, they would fly in the air in groups of 2s and 3s. Many aura refining cultivators were also different from foundation building cultivators. They didn't stay in their Immortal's caves to meditate. Instead, they flew all over the mountain range like headless flies. Greetings, Senior. Just as Xiaohua's figure landed, several aura refining cultivators greeted him. They respectfully saluted him and asked, "May I know which auction house Senior wants to go to?" "Junior is willing to serve." Xiaohua frowned slightly. He only knew the general situation of Haoming City, but he knew very little about the specific matters related to the auction. However, before he could speak, the expressions of those aura refining cultivators changed slightly. They hastily cupped their hands and said, "Junior still has something to do. Junior will take his leave." But Xiaohua was even more baffled. When he raised his head to look, he saw several peak stage aura refining cultivators flying over. Obviously, those aura refining cultivators were afraid of these city guards. "Greetings, Senior." The city guards also saluted respectfully. "May I know what Junior can help you with?" What's up with those aura refining cultivators just now?" Xiaohua pointed his finger and said with a smile. The city guard said respectfully, "Senior, it's time for our Haoming City's once-in-a-century auction. Not only are there auctions for nascent soul cultivators, there are also auctions for gold core cultivators, foundation establishment cultivators, and Qi refinement cultivators. I know that several auctions have started at the same time. I just came out of the Nascent Soul Seniors auction with my seniors. I'm afraid that the auctions for Jindan, Foundation Establishment, and Qi Refinement cultivators have already ended." "Senior," a trace of admiration appeared on the guard's face, and he spoke with even more respect. "Senior went to the auction for Nascent Soul cultivators?" Says, that's right." Tati, seeing that Xiaohua didn't answer directly, the city guard said, the number of nascent soul cultivators who come to Haoming City is limited, so the auctions have always been the shortest. The number of core formation cultivators, foundation building cultivators, and aura refining cultivators increases in turn, so the auctions are also divided into several places. Junior just received news that the auctions for core formation cultivators have already ended, but the auctions for foundation building cultivators and aura refining cultivators have yet to end. Good. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, I want to go to the foundation building cultivators auction. Can fellow Taoist lead the way? Senior, please. The city guard didn't beat around the bush and extended his hand to signal Xiaohua. He then flew up first while the other city guards continued their patrol. Fellow Taoist, what's up with those aura refining cultivators just now? Xiaohua asked again after flying for a while. Oh, it's nothing. The city guard seemed a little reluctant to answer. There are many cultivators who come to Haoming City, so it's hard to distinguish between good and bad. Many cultivators are embarrassingly short of money, so they start to do business with loose cultivators, causing a mess in Haoming City. Of course, those cultivators just now wouldn't have any ideas about foundation building cultivators. However, they perhaps wanted to provide convenience for senior, or perhaps they had other plans. In order to prevent something unfavorable to fellow Taoists from happening, the city guards of Haoming City had no choice but to take action and suppress all the signs in advance. Oh, I see. Xiaohua nodded slightly. In just a short while, the city guard escorted Xiaohua to the front of a huge immortal's cave. This immortal's cave was no less than 10 times the size of Xiaohua's immortal's cave. At the entrance of the immortal's cave stood a dozen or so foundation building city guards. When they saw Xiaohua and Xiaohua coming over, one of them flew over. The city guard who led Xiaohua here saluted this person and explained the matter. The city guard scanned Xiaohua with his divine sense and said with a smile, according to the rules of Haoming City's auctions, you can't enter after the auction starts. However, since fellow Taoist has just come from the auction hosted by the city lord, I presume you still want to continue. How can I stop fellow Taoist's interest? Fellow Taoist only needs to pay 100 high-grade spirit stones to enter. 100. Xiaohua was a little surprised. This number was indeed not much for him, but he had to pay 100 high-grade spirit stones just to enter. He had to admit that Haoming City was too greedy. Fellow Taoist, please know that ordinary foundation building Taoists only need to pay 10 high-grade spirit stones. The city guard said very naturally. If you come late, you'll have to pay 10 times the amount. And I understand. Xiaohua nodded and clapped his hands. Without blinking, he took out 110 spirit stones and said, Fellow Taoist, please lead the way. The city guard scanned with his divine sense and naturally knew the number of spirit stones. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he put them into his storage bag. He said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, please. After the city guard entered the immortal's cave, they turned into a pitch-black quiet room after passing through a few corridors. Fellow Taoist, please. This secret room can isolate the probing of divine sense. Fellow Taoist, you can put on bewilderment and other items inside. The city guard stopped, handed over a number plate, and said with a smile, This is fellow Taoist's number plate. After the auction, fellow Taoist can keep this number plate as a souvenir. Moreover, you can enjoy a discount in my Haoming City shops. Many thanks. Xiaohua nodded and took the number plate. He didn't say anything else. He raised his head and walked in. He didn't put on any bewilderment, and when he passed through the quiet room, his figure and face had already changed. After Xiaohua passed through the quiet room, his eyes lit up. It was a huge immortal's cave, and thousands of cultivators were sitting in different positions in an orderly manner. In the center was a platform, and on the platform was a late-stage foundation building cultivator. In front of that cultivator floated a jade tablet. The sound of bidding rose and fell in an endless stream. A smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. This was the auction that he was familiar with. Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense and sat down on the nearest seat. Just as he sat down, a plate of spirit fruits quietly floated next to the table. And not bad. Xiaohua stretched out his hand without any trace of politeness, picked up a spirit fruit, and put it into his mouth. This was exchanged with 100 high-grade spirit stones, after all. This spirit fruit is really ordinary. Xiaohua casually ate a few mouthfuls, then swept his divine sense toward the high platform in the center. At this time, the auctioneer had already removed the silk on the jade plate. It was a precious refining material. In Xiaohua's ears, there was already a foundation-building cultivator who called a relatively high price for this item. However, after seeing the auction of nascent soul cultivators, Xiaohua felt that this auction of foundation-building cultivators was too childish. Xiaohua was somewhat familiar with this material. It should be related to the repair of the cloud-suppressing seal. Therefore, Xiaohua didn't even warm his seat before he immediately made a bid. Moreover, Xiaohua was too ruthless. He increased the number of spirit stones by 30% all of a sudden. The several people who were still in full swing a moment ago immediately went silent. Good, the auctioneer said with a smile. If no one makes a bid, this Yunying stone is this fellow Taoist's. Immediately after, the auctioneer clapped his hand, and the Yunying stone on the jade plate disappeared. Then, a faint brilliance flashed on Xiaohua's table, and the Yunying stone appeared on it. Not bad, Xiaohua nodded secretly. With a wave of his hand, the Yunying stone was put into his space. Then he placed the spirit stones inside it. When the brilliance disappeared, the spirit stones were also taken away. The legendary technique of Haoming City seems to be very detailed. There are traces of this technique everywhere. Xiaohua thought of Taoist master Yan Hong's methods during the nascent soul meeting. The dozen or so items that followed were all lacking in quality and were boring. Xiaohua didn't care about them. But at this time, the auctioneer spoke again. Fellow Taoists, after more than 10 rounds of bidding, most of the items that fellow Taoists consigned for sale, as well as the items prepared by Haoming City, have been successfully sold. We'll take a break for now. If any fellow Taoist still wants to sell something, you can put it on the table in front of you. I have said this several times, but I still have to say it this time. When you sit down, the number plate on your body has already been connected with the magic array on the table. Fellow Taoists' items also have the mark of the number plate, so there's no mistake. After the bidding, the spirit stones will still be sent to your table. Well, during the break, I will also put the items that failed in the previous bidding here. If any fellow Taoist likes them, you can still take them away. After the auctioneer finished speaking, he waved his hand. Dozens of jade boxes, jade bottles, magic tools, and other items were carried on jade plates and flew around the high platform. It was similar to the bidding that Xiaohua had seen before. Then, the auctioneer stamped his foot again. At the edge of the high platform, a brilliance flashed, and a row of pitch-black magic tools was actually revealed, neatly placed there. There are even magic tools. Xiaohua was slightly taken aback, but when his divine sense swept over, a trace of happiness appeared on his face. He saw that among the row of pitch-black magic tools, there was a magic spear end that was similar to the magic spear in his space, and it was placed there all by itself. In front of the spear end, there was a jade plate with the number of spirit stones written on it. Great, I didn't think I would actually be able to find this item here. Xiaohua was overjoyed. Although he didn't know what kind of magic spear he could refine by putting the magic spear tip, shaft, and tail together, the magic spear tip was his earliest life-saving weapon. He still hoped to complete this magic spear. Seeing the auctioneer's body flash with brilliance and disappear from the high platform, several cultivators stood up from their seats and walked towards the high platform. The majority of the cultivators didn't care. They closed their eyes to rest, or took out something from their storage pouches, causing the entire hall to faintly flicker with brilliance. Chapter 2063. However, when Xiaohua extended his hand to grab the tail of the demonic spear, a fair and jade-like hand also appeared in his field of vision. It was precisely grabbing the tail of the demonic spear. What made Xiaohua very embarrassed was that the two of them were grabbing the tail of the demonic spear. Xiaohua was stunned. This jade hand was obviously a female cultivator. When he turned his head to look, he saw a similarly short and thin woman looking at him with the same stunned expression. This. Xiaohua wanted to withdraw his hand, but he didn't dare to. He was afraid that if he withdrew his hand, the female cultivator would take the devil spear away. Obviously, the female cultivator also had the same idea. She placed one hand on the devil spear and stared at Xiaohua, unwilling to admit defeat. Fellow Taoist. Xiaohua coughed. He looked at the somewhat pale early-stage foundation establishment female cultivator and said, "Why didn't fellow Taoist bid a moment ago, but instead made a move now?" Fellow Taoist also didn't bid, so why did you make a move now? The female cultivator also questioned. It came too late. Xiaohua touched his nose with his other hand and smiled bitterly. Then he looked at the devil spear on the left and said, "There are so many devil spears on this high platform, why did fellow Taoist choose this one? Why don't you choose something else?" "Yes, there are so many devil spears on this high platform, why did fellow Taoist choose this one? Why don't you choose something else?" The female cultivator also said. Alas, Xiaohua sighed. He suddenly raised his head, looked to the left and shouted, "Manager!" Oh! The female cultivator was stunned. She also raised her eyebrows and looked over, but at this moment, she suddenly felt her hand slip. The devil spear's tail that she was holding tightly was actually forcefully pulled away by Xiaohua. She naturally grabbed with her hand, and Xiaohua also felt a great force. She wanted to grab the devil spear's tail, but Xiaohua used a little force and easily pulled the devil spear's tail away. However, Xiaohua was still a little surprised. Looking at the thin and unremarkable female cultivator, he didn't expect this female cultivator to have such great strength. The female cultivator didn't see the empty high platform. She knew that she had been fooled. She hurriedly stepped forward, stretched out her hand, and used an extremely beautiful move to snatch the devil spear's tail away. But how could Xiaohua let her have her way? He raised his left hand and swiftly struck her wrist. At the same time, he slapped his storage bag. Pa! Xiaohua's fist struck the female cultivator's hand, which had quickly turned into a palm. At the same time, the devil spear's tail also disappeared from his hand. The female cultivator was stunned for a moment, but then her face turned as cold as ice. She coldly said, "Are you still a man? Is this how you treat a female cultivator?" "Of course I'm a man." I's dual cultivation partner was the clearest about this. "Fellow Taoist doesn't need to worry about me," Xiaohua said with a smile. "As for the treatment of female cultivators, I don't have enough experience. Please forgive me if I've been rude." "You." The female cultivator said the word "you" again. Then she looked around and saw that there were already people paying attention to them. She stomped her feet and said angrily, "I already had my eyes on this item. How could you snatch it away from me?" "How about this?" Xiaohua nodded. He looked at the high platform and said, "Since the ruler is here, let's let this devil tool bid again. I came late just now. Let's start again?" This time, the female cultivator didn't fall for his trick. She sighed and said, "If I had spirit stones, would I have waited until now?" Xiaohua smiled and pointed at it. "Isn't this the same as the starting price? You could have just bid at that time." The female cultivator looked at Xiaohua with her starry eyes and nodded slightly. "Fellow Taoist, you really just arrived." Then, she explained, "The current bid is already 50% of the original price. In the previous rounds, it was 90% at the beginning, then 80% until now. I've always been afraid that someone would snatch it away. Now I can finally afford to bid, but you snatched it away. Moreover, if you snatched it away from me, this item, I'm afraid I'd really have to bid again." The female cultivator said faintly, "I've been looking for this item for a long time. I came to Bright City this time precisely for this item. Is this item very important to fellow Taoist?" Xiaohua asked curiously. A trace of vigilance flashed through the female cultivator's eyes, and she asked, "If I say it's important, can you give it to me?" Xiaohua shook his head slightly. "I don't know yet. At this moment, a brilliance flashed on the high platform and Zai Qi's figure slowly emerged. Obviously, a new round of bidding was about to begin. Forget it. The female cultivator glared fiercely at Xiao Hua, then turned around and left. Xiao Hua shrugged, took out spirit stones, placed them on a jade plate, and slowly returned to his seat. Zai Qi went up to the high platform and glanced at the things floating around. Almost no one moved, but he remained calm and composed. He formed hand seals, and with a flash of brilliance, all the items fell on the high platform and disappeared. At the same time, the demonic tools on the edge of the high platform also disappeared without a trace. All right, there's still 10 minutes before the last round of bidding. Fellow Taoist who still wants to consign something for sale, please hurry up. Zai Qi said with a smile. The items consigned by fellow Taoist will be appraised by my Haoming City's dedicated consecrators. It's absolutely fair. However, fellow Taoist must give 10% of the items to my Haoming City. Xiao Hua sat on his seat, listless as he listened to Zai Qi's nonsense. However, his mind was thinking about that female cultivator just now. If this female cultivator was concerned about the demonic tools, it would be normal, but why did she care about the demonic spear's tail? Moreover, this female cultivator's strength isn't ordinary. She's the strongest cultivator I've ever seen. Oh! Xiao Hua thought and placed the demonic spear's tip, shaft, and tail together. Sure enough, there was still a section of the spear shaft missing. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua realized. This female cultivator should still have a section of the spear shaft, so she wanted to match it with the demonic spear's tail. Oh no, I offended that female cultivator just now. I'm afraid it won't be easy to get the demonic spear shaft. Is there any other fellow Taoist who wants to consign something for sale? Zai Qi finally asked. Xiao Hua's heart suddenly moved. He took out a very damaged magic tool from the storage pouch he got from the Golden Core Cultivator in the Ink Cloud Black Forest and threw it on the table next to him. A brilliance flashed on the table, and the magic tool disappeared. That Golden Core Cultivator must have gone to the Ink Cloud Black Forest to pick up the items. Maybe he even picked them up for a long time. The items in these two storage pouches are strange. The jade slips are easy to understand, but the magic tools are troublesome. No matter how I look at them, I can't figure out their origins. Why don't I ask the Haoming City's consecrators to help me take a look? Xiao Hua thought to himself as he watched the brilliance on the table disappear. Soon, the first items consigned for sale appeared in front of Zai Qi and were placed on several jade plates. Zai Qi pointed his hand and one of the jade plates flew in front of him. Zai Qi opened the silk cloth and scanned it with his divine sense. He laughed. I knew it. There are still some fellow Taoists who have good things but won't take them out until the last moment. The quality of this magic tool isn't bad. It's not much inferior to the magic tools in the previous auction. Chapter 2064. Soon after, Zai Qi quoted a number of spirit stones according to the price on the jade plate. Then, he gave a simple explanation of the magic tool's function and origin. And it's really not bad. Xiao Huan naturally had no interest in this magic tool, but after listening to Zai Qi's tireless explanation of the magic tool's ins and outs, and hearing that the price was appropriate, he couldn't help but nod inwardly. This magic tool obviously caused a small stir. Many foundation establishment cultivators began to slowly bid, and the number of spirit stones increased. This made Xiao Hua puzzled. It can't be, right? No matter what, it's just a magic tool. Everyone here is a foundation establishment cultivator. Even if they don't have one, won't their sect give one? Why must they compete like this? But then Xiao Hua understood. Although the sect would give magic tools, it also depended on the sect. Not to mention the state of Shi's three cultivation sects, the Imperial Thunder sect and the Rinsing Flower sect might be able to give each of them one. But the problem was, what about the other sects? At least Xiao Hua knew that the previous Shang Huaming didn't have this strength. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that these foundation establishment cultivators were bidding for these magic tools for their own juniors. Thinking of his juniors, Xiao Hua was a bit worried. He had promised his eldest senior brother that he would give Xiang Zhili a great magical ability, but what magical ability? How would he explain it when the time came? Soon after, Zai Qi bid for many other strange things, but Xiaohua didn't care. What he wanted was a cultivation method for refining the body or tempering the bones. His space didn't lack these odds and ends. All right, this old man has another good thing here. Zai Qi clapped his hands in disappointment. The silk covering the jade plate was removed, and a light cyan jade slip appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Cultivation method? Xiaohua's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but straighten his back slightly. His movement wasn't obvious, but in the eyes of a certain person, it was clear. This jade slip doesn't record any cultivation method, nor is it about refining tools or creating talismans. Zai Qi looked at the jade slip in his hand and said with a smile. Oh, everyone was disappointed, and Xiaohua even sat down. However, this is also a special item that appeared in my auction today. Zai Qi seemed to be whetting everyone's appetites. After a short pause, he continued, this jade slip contains a description in the Devil Realm's language. This is something that is rarely seen in auctions in Haoming City. Tisk, a cultivator sneered rudely. Senior, you're exaggerating. What do we not have at the auction in Haoming City? Even if the written descriptions in the demon realm were scarce, what was the use? We are not demonic cultivators, nor can we wield demonic artifacts. What use do we have for this thing? Hee, fellow Taoist, please calm down. Zai Qi looked at the cultivator whose cultivation was lower than his and didn't get angry. He said, I only said that this thing was rare, I didn't mention the price. However, as the manager spoke, he was a bit stunned. He scratched his head and said self-deprecatingly, I was wrong. This item was actually set by the fellow Taoist who put it up for sale. Haha, and the price isn't low. As he spoke, the Chancellor spoke a number that was definitely not low. Is there something wrong with this guy? The cultivator who spoke muttered, which foundation establishment cultivator would take out so many spirit stones for this thing? However, before he could finish speaking, a voice said, I want it. When everyone's divine senses swept over, they found that the person who spoke was Xiaohua. At this moment, Xiaohua was overjoyed. It was really like someone giving him a pillow when he was feeling sleepy. Wasn't he lacking a jade slip that could read thousands of characters in the demon realm? When the cultivator saw that an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator like him actually stood up to bid, he could only shake his head and sit down. Xiaohua stood there with a smile. He was a bit impatient. He knew very well that although the price of the spirit stones just now was lower than the previous magic tools and medicinal pills, it was definitely not low for this kind of almost useless jade slip. It could even be said to be very high. Who would bid against him for this? Moreover, Xiaohua didn't think that there were many cultivators present who had more spirit stones in their storage pouches than he did. However, without waiting for him to stand for a moment, without waiting for the Chancellor to ask another question, he heard a clear voice laughing not far away. Sure enough, fellow Taoist knows his stuff. I have no choice but to raise the price. Huh? It's actually that female cultivator just now. Xiaohua was stunned at first, but after a sweep with his divine sense, he immediately understood. This female cultivator also wants the demon tool, so of course she wants this jade slip. Immediately, Xiaohua raised the price without hesitation. And that female cultivator also seemed to be determined. She added spirit stones bit by bit. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the price of this jade slip had reached an extremely high level. However, Xiaohua was still indifferent. This number of spirit stones was still very low. However, hearing that female cultivator's calm and unruffled bid, Xiaohua was a bit bewildered. He secretly said, just now, this female cultivator said that she didn't have many spirit stones and wanted to take advantage of the situation to get the demon spear shaft. How come she has spirit stones now? Could it be that she was lying to me? Alas, I don't have many spirit stones left. At this time, that female cultivator said regretfully, I can only add up to this point. If fellow Taoist raises the price again, I can only give up. Xiaohua frowned, rolled his eyes, and cupped his hands. So it's like this. As the saying goes, a good man doesn't fight with a woman. Since that's the case, I can't snatch what you like even more. I won't raise the price. This jade slip belongs to fellow Taoist. Ah? The female cultivator obviously didn't expect Xiaohua to give up so easily. She was astonished, stamping her feet, and asked, "You? How can you not raise the price?" Xiaohua laughed, and everyone else also laughed. I gave this jade slip to you, and you're actually not happy? You even want I to raise the price? What kind of logic is this? That female cultivator said, a few times, but she was also helpless and could only sit down. Alright, this item belongs to this fellow Taoist. Zai Qi smiled and pointed his finger. But right after that, Zai Qi was also a little stunned. However, a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he clapped his hand. That jade slip disappeared, but a light flashed next to the female cultivator. Obviously, it was transferred to the female cultivator's table. Soon after, Zai Qi waved his hand, and a jade bottle appeared in midair. Zai Qi glanced at it and was even more surprised. He said with a smile, "Strange things happen every year, but this year, my Haoming city has the most." This foundation-building pill has become increasingly rare in the auction in recent years, just like the exquisite grass used to concoct foundation-building pills. It's getting rarer every year. Every sect, and even every cultivator treasures this item so that they can keep it for their own disciples. The previous 2 bottles of foundation-building pills already caused a sensation, and in the last round of the auction, the penultimate item to be auctioned is actually a foundation-building pill? Foundation-building pill? It's really a foundation-building pill? Who would still take it out? Several cultivators around Xiaohua unconsciously stood up. Why do you say that? Xiaohua was stunned. He remembered that when he participated in the auction last time, foundation-building pills were indeed rare, but it seemed that they weren't this rare. Listening to Zai Qi's tone, the number of foundation-building pills had actually become fewer and fewer in the past 10 years? Alright, these are 2 foundation-building pills. The starting price is 100 top-grade spirit stones. Zai Qi stated the starting price that Xiaohua knew was 5 times the starting price. Good. Xiaohua immediately understood. No wonder when he entered Haoming City that day and gave Bai Fengliang several foundation-building pills, that guy's face was filled with gratitude. It turned out, in the current cultivation world, foundation-building pills were actually so rare. 850. Xiaohua had just started to sigh with emotion when the price of foundation-building pills soared by 50%. Crazy! Xiaohua shook his head and sat steadily on his seat. Looking at everyone's eagerness, he had other plans in his mind. In the end, the 2 foundation-building pills were sold for 200 top-grade spirit stones. This made many foundation-building cultivators sigh. Fellow Taoist. Xiaohua thought for a moment and cupped his hands towards the cultivator beside him. I don't quite understand. Why are these foundation-building pills so precious? When did fellow Taoist build his foundation? That cultivator didn't answer but asked instead. I'm ashamed. It's already been 40 years. Xiaohua smiled apologetically. Fellow Taoist hasn't taken in a disciple yet, right? That's right. That's right. The cultivator nodded and said, since fellow Taoist doesn't use foundation-building pills, you naturally wouldn't have thought that foundation-building pills would suddenly become scarce in the past 10 years. The question is, why are they scarce? Xiaohua asked, puzzled. That cultivator shook his head slightly and said in a low voice, I heard some vague news. Fellow Taoist looks familiar and feels like old friends at first sight. That's why I revealed it to you. You can't tell others. Xiaohua's expression turned cold and he said in all seriousness, I will definitely keep my mouth shut. I heard that the heavenly Tao has changed greatly. My Tao sect has already reached its end. The ancient celestials will once again revive from overseas. In the future, it might be the world of the celestials. The cultivator was even more serious. The spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits that we use for cultivation are all different from before. All the medicinal pills that are required for cultivation can no longer be refined. Therefore, not only have the prices of spiritual herbs and other things increased, even the important medicinal pills like foundation-building pills have been hoarded by cultivators and won't be revealed in the auction again. Ah? Xiao Hua was stunned. However, without waiting for him to speak, that cultivator said proudly, not only that, the spirit stone veins have also undergone great changes. They can no longer be used for cultivation. Many large sects are crazily fighting over spirit stone veins outside. These spirit stones will also become scarce in the future. Xiao Hua originally didn't want to believe this cultivator's words, but he had seen Shanghua sect snatching the spirit stone veins with his own eyes. He could not believe these words. Seeing Xiao Hua's bewildered appearance, that cultivator turned his head very disdainfully. That's right. Such ordinary cautiousness scared an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator into a daze. How could he not be proud? Fellow Taoists, this is the last item in the final round of this auction. The Chancellor, who was on the high platform, ignored Xiao Hua's thoughts and said loudly, generally speaking, the consecrators of the Haoming City will save the most valuable items for last. I'm afraid that the foundation-building elixir just now was done by them. Chapter 2065. Come, let's see what the final item is. Zai Qi lifted the silk cloth and glanced at the jade slip on the jade plate. He was stunned. After a moment of hesitation, he sent a voice transmission to someone behind him. After confirming, he smiled bitterly and said, even I was surprised by this item. I've made a fool of myself. Then he picked up the jade slip, looked at it a few times, and said, allow this poor Taoist to keep everyone guessing. What is this? Could it be that this item has an origin? A cultivator stood up and smiled. Can I take a look? Of course. Zai Qi waved his hand, and the jade plate flew to the cultivator. The cultivator picked up the rhombus-shaped magic tool with 4 missing corners and pondered for a long time. He shook his head and said, the spiritual energy fluctuations in this item are weak. It must be seriously damaged. It will take a lot of effort to repair it. Moreover, one's spiritual sense can only see the surface. It seems to be able to penetrate it, but there's a faint barrier that prevents it from entering. I can't see what kind of magic tool it is. The other cultivators were also very interested, but they couldn't see any clues. Let me take a look. A cultivator in a mesmerizing robe said in a deep voice. Let me take a look first. Similarly, another mesmerizing robe cultivator sitting on the other side said in unison. Then, the first mesmerizing robe cultivator waved his hand, and the jade plate flew in his direction. It seemed like it was about to break free from Zai Qi's control. At the same time, the other mesmerizing robe cultivator stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. The jade plate also flew in his direction. Seniors. Zai Qi frowned and said, please let go. This item has been appraised by our Haoming City's consecrators. It's a famous magic tool from 1,000 years ago called the Mist Puppet. If you like it, please bid. What? A magic tool? Xiao Hua was stunned. Obviously, this was the so-called magic tool he threw into the transportation array on the table. Mist Puppet? This is the mist puppet that is said to be able to create an illusion array on its own? A cultivator looked at the damaged mist puppet in disbelief. That's right. The Zai Qi nodded. However, the corrosion on its surface is particularly severe. Not only does it look completely different from before, even the outer formation has been destroyed. According to the consecrator's speculation, it should be because the owner of the black mist tree had died in the black mist forest, and the black mist tree had been corroded by the black mist sand for thousands of years. It is also because of this that Mo Bao, who has not been seen in the black forest for thousands of years, has blown this item out of the black forest, allowing it to see the light of day again. Since it's the Wu Qi, this poor Taoist won't say too much about how powerful it is. The core of this magic treasure is as good as new. If any fellow Taoist can repair it, it will be able to regain the power of the Wu Qi from 1,000 years ago. As the Chancellor spoke, he took the Wu Qi into his hand and reported a number of spirit stones that shocked Xiaohua. That's right, this was a transcendent artifact. Although it was damaged, its core was still intact. It was much more useful than those fragments and so on. How could it not have a good starting price? Hearing the number of spirit stones, the stingy Xiaohua was somewhat regretful. He had only thought this was an ordinary magic tool. However, he immediately laughed inwardly. There are many similar items in this little master space. I'll take one out and test it out. I'll know that these things have their origins. In the future, I'll slowly find out how to use them. At worst, I'll take it out and bid for some spirit stones. That's better than not knowing its value, right? The mist puppet was indeed famous. Very quickly, the price reached a very high price. The crowd of Foundation establishment cultivators stopped and watched the two cultivators that the Chancellor called seniors bid. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the mist puppet was finally won by the second mist puppet cultivator. All right, fellow Taoists. After the mist puppet cultivator delivered the spirit stones, the Chancellor clapped his hand. The entire hall flashed with brilliance, and all the cultivators' tables lit up. A storage pouch naturally appeared on Xiaohua's table. Xiaohua reached out and put it into his bosom. After the brilliance flashed, the Chancellor said, "This time, the auction for Foundation establishment cultivators has come to an end. Thank you, fellow Taoists, for coming to my Haoming city. 5 years later, my Haoming city will still hold the auction for Foundation establishment cultivators. I welcome fellow Taoists to come again. In addition, fellow Taoists who consigned the mist puppet cultivators, your spirit stones have already been delivered. Please check and accept them. If there's anything inappropriate, please don't leave the auction. My Haoming city will help you deal with it." Immediately, the entire high platform radiated rays of light in all directions. All kinds of brilliance flashed, and rainbow bridges stretched out from the high platform to the feet of the cultivators. "Let's go!" Xiaohua sighed inwardly. He floated onto the nearest rainbow bridge, only to see the rainbow bridge slowly shrink. At this moment, Xiaohua heard a crisp and urgent voice say, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Xiaohua turned around and saw that thin and weak-looking female cultivator. She was waving at him and seemed to want to fly over. Unfortunately, before she could fly, the Chancellor, who had disappeared a moment ago, appeared in front of her. He seemed to be looking for her. "Fellow Taoist, please wait for me outside. I have something to discuss with fellow Taoist." The female cultivator was somewhat embarrassed. After shouting at Xiaohua a few times, she turned around and spoke to the Chancellor. Xiaohua didn't respond. Obviously, the female cultivator wanted to get the devil spear tail from him, and Xiaohua absolutely wouldn't give it away. Xiaohua followed the rainbow bridge out of the auction. His expression changed as he waited. Xiaohua was somewhat hesitant. After thinking for a moment, he flew to the side of the city guard who was guarding the auction. Without waiting for him to speak, the city guard respectfully saluted and said, "Greetings, Senior. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Well, I don't understand." Xiaohua asked. "I specially came to Haoming City to look for some body-refining cultivation methods in this auction, but there wasn't a single one in the entire auction. Haoming City's auction doesn't live up to its name." The city guard was stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect Xiaohua to ask him such a question. Thus, after thinking for a moment, he smiled apologetically and said, "Junior wants to ask Senior. Does Senior want this cultivation method for your future nephew?" Xiaohua shook his head slightly. "This cultivation method is what I want to use." Hee, Senior must be joking with Junior." A smile appeared on the city guard's face as he said, "Senior is now in the Foundation establishment realm, and the Jindan Dao is right in front of you. As long as you cultivate according to this cultivation method, you won't be far from the Jindan Dao, and even the nascent soul realm is in sight. Why are you looking for a body-refining path? If Senior is thinking for your future nephew, Junior might be able to believe it." Hee, fellow Taoist really understands. Xiaohua changed his mind and said with a smile, "Hee, Junior has seen a lot of things, that's all." The city guard was somewhat proud as he said, since it's a cultivation method used by aura refining disciples, it naturally has to be found in the auction for aura refining cultivators. Senior came to this auction for foundation establishment cultivators, so it's natural for you to use a bamboo basket to draw water. Chapter 2066. Not necessarily. Xiaohua said with a smile. Foundation building pills also appeared in the auction just now. Don't tell me foundation building pills aren't for aura refining disciples? The city guard replied confidently, Senior is a foundation building cultivator, so you must know the quality of foundation building pills and whether they can be used or not. But what about body refining cultivation techniques? Do you know if they're suitable for your disciples? I'm afraid you're the only one who knows this kind of cultivation technique, right? Ha, Xiaohua laughed. He clapped his hands and took out a few spirit stones, stuffed them into the city guard's hands, and said, Fellow Taoist is right. I'm really bad. The city guard reached out his hand without leaving a trace and caught the spirit stones. Soon after, he whispered a few words to Xiaohua through telepathy, making him beam with joy. Right at this moment, a figure rushed out of the auction very quickly. She looked all around with a somewhat anxious expression on her face. It was the strong but thin female cultivator from just now. Xiaohua had already regained his original appearance. Whether it was his face or figure, he had already changed. Only his Taoist robe hadn't been changed. The female cultivator first saw Xiaohua's Taoist robe. Her happy expression only flashed for a moment before it was replaced by heavy disappointment. City guard, have you seen? The female cultivator shouted at the city guard and described Xiaohua's disguised appearance. Senior, please no. The city guard was still respectful. Junior has never seen a senior with this kind of appearance. Oh, the female cultivator nodded and asked Xiaohua somewhat unwillingly, has fellow Taoist seen him before? That cultivator wore the same Taoist robe as fellow Taoist. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, and he said with a smile, I haven't seen him either. However, is there something fellow Taoist didn't say inside? How did you find him outside? Alas, the female cultivator sighed and said reluctantly, I have some matters to attend to. Right at this moment, a voice said, Qiao, is that guy here? Brother Ming, that cultivator disappeared a long time ago. The female cultivator called Qiao turned her head in disappointment. It's all Qiao's fault for acting on my own and provoking a senior from Haoming City. Alas, Xiaohua raised his head to look. A tall and sturdy man who was half a head taller than him slowly walked over. This cultivator was dressed strangely. His arms and legs were exposed, and his skin was covered with black hair. He was like a thick pillar. Ah, a middle foundation establishment cultivator? Xiaohua's eyes flashed and he looked at the female cultivator. This female cultivator doesn't seem to be a good person. I don't know what she's planning. As a result, Xiaohua dispelled the idea of continuing to collude with Qiao. He turned around and flew towards the residence of the aura refining cultivators. Forget it, Qiao. Since we can't find it, then forget it. The male cultivator smiled and said, There are so many demonic artifacts. You can just find another one and try to repair it. Why do you only want that one? Sigh, Brother Ming, you don't know, Qiao said as she flew. That demonic device has an extraordinary origin, and Qiao learned about it from the ancient records in her clan. If it wasn't for the fact that there was something special inside the demonic spear, Qiao wouldn't have been able to imagine it. How did a weapon that was recorded in ancient times fall into the hands of the demon realm? Furthermore, it has become a demonic artifact. So that's how it is. That male cultivator suddenly understood and smiled apologetically. How would I know about these things? Only a skilled craftsman like Qiao in the clan can look up the ancient records in the clan. Sai, let's go. Qiao sighed and said, Not only did we not get that demonic spear, but we also lost some spirit stones. In this way, there are some things that can't be exchanged. I understand now. That male cultivator slapped his forehead and said, Brother Ming, what did you think of? Xiao asked curiously. The male cultivator said naively, since that guy snatched the demonic spear's tail from you, then he might have seen something. Maybe he also has the same broken spear as you. Xiao was speechless. Her thoughts were naturally the same as Xiaohua's. She also thought of the other party's situation, which was why she was determined to find Xiaohua. Let's go, Brother Ming. Let's go to the shops in Haoming City and see if there's anything that can be exchanged, Xiao said indifferently. A moment after Xiaohua and the others left, Yan Yu flew over and very familiarly walked in front of the city guard. He quietly stuffed a few spirit stones into the guard's hand and whispered a few words. A trace of embarrassment appeared on the city guard's face, but after thinking for a moment, he answered with a smile. Hearing this, Yan Yu's face showed a satisfied expression. Soon after, he handed over a few more spirit stones. Xiaohua flew into the area where the aura refining cultivators lived. Without waiting for the city guard to come over, just like before, several aura refining cultivators came over to strike up a conversation. Xiaohua smiled and said, I want to go to Yutian Paradise. Who among you knows? Sure enough, a seemingly quick-witted aura refining cultivator quickly raised his hand and said, Senior, this junior knows. Good you take I there. Senior, please. After saying that aura refining cultivator led the way and flew up first. After flying for several breaths, that aura refining cultivator asked cautiously, Senior, what do you always want to go to Yutian Paradise to look for? Xiaohua smiled and said, Are you very familiar with Yutian Paradise? Hearing Xiaohua's response, a smile appeared on that cultivator's face and he answered, Yutian Paradise is specially set up by Haoming City for us aura refining cultivators. It's for our convenience. Soon after, he explained in detail, Senior, you must also know that Haoming City holds auctions of different scales every 5 years, every 10 years, and even every 100 years. However, we aura refining cultivators have a rather urgent need for medicinal pills, yellow talismans, spiritual plants, and so on. We can't compare to seniors who have a long lifespan, so we can wait. However, if it's an ordinary shop, it's difficult to distinguish the quality and authenticity of these things. It's even possible that we'll be targeted by bystanders, which could lead to disaster. Therefore, Haoming City opened this Yutian Paradise in the residences of aura refining cultivators. It specializes in purchasing medicinal pills, spiritual plants, and even cultivation methods from aura refining cultivators and reselling them to aura refining cultivators who need them. To be honest, this Yutian Paradise is a shop exclusively run by Haoming City. Junior. I don't go there often. The prices of the things there are quite high, and Junior often doesn't have enough spirit stones. Xiaohua originally wanted to ask more about the details of Yutian Paradise, but after hearing that this cultivator didn't go there often, he knew that even if he asked, it would only be hearsay. He might as well go there himself, so he didn't ask anymore. On the contrary, Xiaohua no longer asked about the cultivator. He was a little anxious and racked his brains to talk about some interesting things he heard. However, Xiaohua didn't find these useful. After all, Xiaohua was passing by Haoming City, and what that cultivator said wasn't what he wanted to know at all. By the way, do you know the rock border sect of the Lian state? Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, and he asked, Are there any disciples of their sect in Haoming City? Well, the cultivator looked awkward and smiled apologetically. Senior, I seem to have heard of this cultivation sect, but I've never heard of any of their disciples traveling in Haoming City. And Xiaohua didn't comment. Senior, this is Yutian Paradise. The aura refining cultivators stopped in midair, pointed at a rather large immortal's cave in front of them, and smiled apologetically. Junior, won't accompany Senior inside. Please forgive me. Seeing that the immortal's cave was guarded by Haoming City's city guards and that there were many cultivators going in and out, including both aura refining and foundation building cultivators, Xiaohua nodded and said, Thank you for your trouble. After saying that, he flew towards the immortal's cave, ignoring the cultivator. Senior. That cultivator was a little anxious, but he didn't dare to speak loudly. Xiaohua laughed and waved his hand, causing several spirit stones to fly towards the cultivator. "Thank you, Senior." The regret in the cultivator's eyes turned into surprise. He quickly took the spirit stones and bowed to express his gratitude. When Xiaohua landed in front of Yutian Paradise, he saw the city guard quickly salute him. Several aura-refining cultivators going in and out also stopped and respectfully invited Xiaohua to enter. Xiaohua was different from the other foundation-building cultivators who held their heads high. He nodded slightly at those cultivators and city guards before quickly walking in. "Oh, it's so big. You're really considerate." Xiaohua entered the Immortal's Cave and saw that the huge Immortal's Cave was divided into several floors. There were many steps on the stone walls leading to different heights, and there were similar shops lined up at each height. Apart from the shops, there were no shop assistants to welcome customers. Everything was the same as the shops Xiaohua had seen before. "Senior, what are you looking for?" A cultivator wearing a brand new robe stepped forward and asked respectfully. "Junior is Haoming City's city guard. I'm here to guide Senior and fellow Taoists in this Immortal's Cave." "Oh, I want to see aura-refining cultivation methods." "Where are they?" Xiaohua knew that the things here had all been appraised by Haoming City's consecrators, so the possibility of him encountering rare things wasn't high. Therefore, he went straight to the point and asked. The city guard didn't find it strange and said with a smile, "Senior, please go to the 4th floor. There are cultivation methods required by aura-refining cultivators there. I hope Senior will be satisfied. Do you need Junior to take you there?" "Is there really even cultivation methods for aura refining?" Xiaohua was slightly surprised. He naturally thought of his predicament back then when he didn't have any cultivation methods. Then he shook his head and said, "No need, I will go there myself." "Senior, please." The city guard smiled and pointed in the direction to the 4th floor. Xiaohua was full of curiosity when he went up to the 4th floor. He randomly found a shop and went in. "Senior, what kind of cultivation methods do you need?" The person who greeted him was still the same city guard in the same robe. Xiaohua didn't say anything. Instead, he looked up and sized up the shop. He saw that this shop was an oval-shaped space that was more than 100 feet in size. It was divided into dozens of partitions, and each partition had a city guard standing straight as if they were responsible for their own duties. Xiaohua was standing inside the shop, facing a crescent-shaped table with several balls of different colors on it. The city guard who greeted him was standing in front of these balls. "What kind of cultivation methods do you have here?" Xiaohua asked in return. He was indeed very curious about the cultivation methods he could buy here. "Senior, please know. The cultivation methods in my Yutian Paradise are roughly divided into 5 categories: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Senior, please tell Junior what attribute Senior's nephew is, so that Junior can recommend different cultivation methods for Senior." The city guard was still very respectful. "Yes, my nephew is of the earth attribute." Xiaohua replied. "They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."